And that's it. We are live.
We are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the ForgeCast. My name's Sam Towns.
And I'm Alex Norton.
And here we are, live from Valhalla Ironworks channel.
That's right. And this episode, very special episode of the ForgeCast, is brought to you, as you can see at the top, by Weber Abrasives, where we get our epic 3M Cubitron belts from. They're currently working on an awesome new website, but for now, if you need your Cubitron fix, give Rob a call. He'll be sure to help you out and make sure you tell him that we sent you as well, because he is awesome and he loves the show. So give him a ring on, if you're in Australia, 08 8346 9571, or visit him at abrasives.on.net.
There you go.
It is awesome to see so many people here already. 24 viewers.
That's it. Yeah, it's good. It's been a long time coming. 52 episodes. It's hard to believe that it's a year's worth of episodes.
It's hard crazy to believe that everybody put up with us for this long.
Yeah, that's it. It's crazy.
But I suppose we should start out the classic way, Sam, and you can tell everybody what you did this week.
Oh man, well, it's kind of in 2 weeks because we, haven't really done the what have you done for the last 2 weeks.
That's right.
So, what have I been doing last 2 weeks? I have been working on a knife for Blade Symposium. It's a harpoon point hunter. As everyone will know, I like my harpoon points, and it is literally on my brand. And this one is a little special because this one has a hamon, and I'm currently working on the guard, which is going to be pretty special as well. It's been a lot of work, and I've had some awesome input from D. Hedges, one of my favorite people, into how to approach this build. So it's been really fun. There's been some design changes along the way, but yeah, at the moment I'm hand sanding this. I'm actually sitting in front of my hand sanding setup. Most people will recognize the backdrop.
Curtis at Noble Pursuit is saying that's a butter knife for you, Sam.
That's true. Yeah, this is like the smallest blade that I make. But yeah, so as people will know, I've booked my ticket to Symposium at Tharwa Valley Forge. Get to meet Kyle Royer, which is going to be fantastically fun. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's what I've been working on. I also did a couple of custom commissions, rehandling a couple of Wusthof kitchen knives with some stabilized red gum burl. Actually, I think it was fiddleback red gum. And, it's mostly just been kind of catching up on little things. I made myself, sitting behind me, made myself a little Sloyd knife. I said I was going to make one after Perth Knife Show because I made one for the show, but that was kind of a whittling knife. It had a much smaller blade. So, I made this one. This has actually got the handle from my 2-pound hammer, which I broke during my last live stream.
Yeah, Joel is actually asking, is that the one that you forged in the live stream?
This is not the one that I forged in the live stream. The one I forged in the live stream was actually a custom commission for a medieval reenactment friend of mine. It was about that long rather than this long.
Gotcha.
And that one was, I forged just the blade, and he was going to do the hilt and all that kind of stuff. This weekend, actually, he's at Hyde Park Fair, which is medieval, it's a kind of a market, but they also have the medieval reenactment corner. Mm-hmm. And so he's going to be making the hilt while he's there as kind of a showpiece. He's also the same guy I made the Turkish saddle axe for, if anyone watches my YouTube channel.
That was a cool project, yeah.
Yeah, I really liked it. It was good fun.
Yeah.
But yes.
Just to answer a quick question here for Yamez is asking if we're going to be posting this as a podcast, and yes, we will.
Yes, we are. Yeah, Alex is recording all this audio. The audio might not be as good because I'm not recording it on my end.
Yeah, that's right.
and I'm using my computer's microphone, not my phone's.
Mm.
But yeah, so it's been full on. It's just been kind of mostly fiddly work, trying to catch up with everything before I head off to Symposium. Unfortunately, I haven't got around to making my hammer punch dies for the press, so I haven't been able to make any hammers or anything like that recently. And that's going to have to wait until I return from Queensland. I'll be gone for a month. So
Yeah, it's a good long trip.
yeah, we've been recording episodes in advance, just to let everyone know now. We've been recording a backlog of episodes for while I'm away. So if you wonder why the episodes sound out of order, it's because we've been recording them before I go.
Because we know you guys can't go without your fix.
Well, that's it. Yeah, a month without the ForgeCast is madness. What are you talking about?
Yeah. So does that pretty much sum up?
Yeah, that pretty much sums up. What about you, Alex? What have you been up to?
I've been sort of doing a real mix of things recently, actually. I've in just the last couple of days, I've been playing with some new steel I got from Creative Man, actually 1084, which is sort of an idiot-proof steel, so it's good for me. Doing more resin experimentation, as we talked about on a recent episode. I'm not sure if that was one of the backlog episodes that I was talking about that, but I've been doing a lot of work with resin, doing my own sort of stabilization or semi-stabilization and void filling and decorative work for handles and things. Been doing some medieval cutlery orders from reenactors as well, which is always funny to me. They always want them to look so rustic. But medieval blacksmiths are actually capable of doing incredibly beautiful work. But they always think if you want medieval cutlery, it's got to look super rustic. So, yeah, it's funny trying to artistically do work that is of like a lower standard than what you are capable of. One interesting commission that I got recently was a fantasy version of an Italian stiletto knife. Which you'll be seeing probably next week. And I can say next week because it's live this time instead of doing it. Yeah, so it's a fairly simplistic project, but it's kind of like halfway between a wand and a stiletto dagger. I've been doing more leather work than I'm happy doing because anybody who follows me knows that I really don't like doing leather work. I'm not very good at it, but a couple of commissions have required sheaths, and so I've had to break my stand. I'm trying to train up my student Adam to do my leather work for me. So he's doing well with that. He's learning fast. I've been restoring an old buffalo blower, and finally all done now. I just need to put in a new clutch spring for it and weld on some new legs because the poor thing was left out in the rain for 20 years and it totally seized up and the legs kind of rusted off it and everything, but it's a massive blower, a beautiful piece of machinery. The first time I got the actual crank to rotate all the way around, it took every bit of strength I had, but now I can push it with my pinky finger, so it's beautiful now. I'm really happy with it. It's a beast. It weighs like 20 kilos. It's crazy. I also got a wonderful Shaman Company blower that was made in Melbourne. I don't know much about it, and I haven't been able to find much info about the Shaman Company. But the blower is beautiful. It's much smaller. It's about the size of my Zomax blower, but it's going to be going towards a more portable forge because I've got a St. Patrick's Day Celtic festival coming up that they want me to do some traditional blacksmithing at. And so I need a more portable forge because last time I did a forging demonstration, moving all of my stuff was a nightmare. It was so bad. Oh, yeah. And the funny thing is, like, my forge in my workshop is fairly skeletonized version of what we normally have for a solid fuel forge. And even then, it's heavy as hell and awkward and large. So this one's going to be like a breakdown forge. And we're actually building that tomorrow, so that's going to be really interesting. I've also been making up a lot of jigs to try and speed up my workflow process to build up some, batch work, some stock for upcoming shows and markets that I'm doing. I don't have cool props to show everybody like Sam does, but a long time ago, I actually forged out this straight razor from an old file, and it's been sitting for ages with like a half completed handle on it. And I went back to it, totally stuffed the handle, and have to start again, which is sort of like a blessing and a curse because I was never fully happy with it. But I was very happy with the shape I got for this. This is actually, I think this is just really nice lines on this. So be looking forward to getting back into that. And yeah, that's pretty much been my last couple of weeks, really.
Yeah, cool. Apparently people can't hear me.
Can't hear you.
Yeah.
Well, your sound's coming through. People have been responding to you.
Have they?
Yeah.
While you've been soloed? Cool. No audio from me while the camera's just been on you.
Oh, okay, fair enough. That'd probably be my fault, guys.
Yeah, all good. They didn't need to hear me. I wasn't that important.
He didn't talk much during that time. So.
No, I was just sitting there nodding.
Forge, right, yes, I did pick up that blower here in Tassie. It was from a awesome bloke up at a place called Devonport. He picked it up years and years ago, and it sort of lived in his shed for a long time. And he did a trade with me for a knife for it, which was really nice.
Yeah, that's super cool. Like we were saying on an earlier episode of the ForgeCast, if you can't buy what you're looking for, then maybe go out there and see if you can find someone who are willing to trade for it.
You would be surprised how many people are willing to do trades.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've traded for quite a few things over the years, and I still do. I'm planning on trading like with every hammersmith I know, so that I can get a whole bunch more hammers.
Yeah. I was trying to convince Dan Moss to do a trade with me for another hammer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
His Swedish cross pins that he's been doing are just gorgeous. There's such nice looking hammers. So.
Yeah, they're pretty sick.
But yeah, so let's have a look at the comments here. We've been missing a few while we've been ranting on. The ForgeCast needs merch. We do actually have merch, Curtis.
We have merch.
Yeah, if you go to my Redbubble store, it's all there. I know it's on my store, and we don't have a ForgeCast store, but all of the sales of ForgeCast related merchandise go directly to funding the show because running a podcast isn't free, unfortunately. So every sale of anything ForgeCast related directly goes into the account for keeping the show alive. So definitely check out my Redbubble store. The mugs in particular, I'm quite proud of. I quite like them.
We also have a PayPal link in the description, don't we?
It's also in the picture just below our. You can see it just there.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm pointing.
So if you do want to directly donate to the ForgeCast, we have a PayPal link that you can go to donate there.
Because I'm not cool enough to be monetized yet on my channel.
Yeah, we did toss up going onto my channel, but Alex had all of the technology stuff set up on his channel. So
and after seeing what I went through and all of the screaming into pillows, Sam didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, no, Christ, the amount of work that Alex put in to get this live stream running properly. Yeah, I'm good.
So 573 Knives is actually doing a trade at the moment. He's making something to trade for a lawnmower blade. I imagine you mean like a ride-on blade, the big wide ones. There's actually some decent steel on those things. That I don't know what it is. I'd say it's something like 1045 or something like that.
Yeah, it'll be like a medium to low carbon steel of some form. It could be a high alloy, it could be low alloy. It'll depend on its age and the manufacturer and stuff like that.
I'd probably lean on the side of doing something with like a thick spine, something a bit chunkier with it.
Choppy.
Yeah, choppy thing, yeah.
Because they're more impact resistant than edge retention. They don't really need to hold an edge.
Yeah, that's right. It's more of a parting tool than
a fast moving blunt object will remove things just as well as a slow moving sharp one. So
yeah. So Adam's still waiting for the ForgeCast calendar to come out in the merch section.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the weather to get cooler so that I can start doing all my poses.
That's right. Maybe they want you to be all sweaty, Sam.
Well, this is true. Yeah, get myself oiled up.
Quench in oil.
I've seen that
Parks 50.
Yamez from Island Metal Forge has been asking the same question a couple of times. No, I haven't received a sticker pack from Jillian, so sorry, mate. I don't know what the story is with that.
Neither have I. So, although I did get told I've been having some massive troubles with people internationally making orders from me. The delays are huge, and I've only just found out that Australia Post has been putting severe delays, like up to 4 or 5 week delays on parcels because of the coronavirus.
Yeah.
So that may be affecting it, maybe.
Could be.
Because we all know that stickers are a carrier for viral infection.
Coronavirus, yeah. That's right, yeah. It's not like they go through, IR and radiation and all that kind of stuff when they arrive.
That's it. If your parcel's glowing, it's coronavirus free.
That's it. If it's not hitting, 140 on your Geiger counter, you're just not safe.
Yeah. So we didn't do our songs of the week, and we've prepped a couples because it's going to be a long episode. So my first one for the day is actually from a band called Half Alive, and the song is called Still Feel. Now I have different playlists for different moods on my MP3 player, as most people do, and sometimes I just feel like listening to songs. Those songs that it's almost impossible to walk while listening to the songs without wanting to turn it into like the Austin Powers intro scene. Like you just can't help but dance because they're just that good. This is one of those songs, and the music video actually is a giant choreographed dance routine that is awesome. So definitely check that song out because it will just make your feet want to move.
Fair enough. Well, my song of the week, this week I've already shouted out Tyler Childers, so one of my other favorite indie country boys who's bringing back old school country is Coulter Wall. A fair few people in our chat probably know Coulter Wall, and I kind of tossed up in my head which one of his songs I wanted to shout out because there are like 1,000 that I like. But one of my favorites at the moment is 13 Silver Dollars, which is kind of a story song.
Oh, yeah, I know you like your story songs.
Oh, yeah. Me and my story songs. It's actually one of his less well-known ones, which is funny. But, yeah, it's one of my favorites. So, yes.
Have to check
Coulter Wall, 13 Silver Dollars.
Dan Moss just entered and said he entered the chat just as you were talking about oiling yourself up, Sam.
Well, you got to enter at the right time. It's funny because Coulter Wall looks like a 19-year-old kid, like a ginger 19-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
But he has one of the deepest and sultriest voices.
Yeah.
When you hear him sing, it sounds like he's 50, 60 years old and he's lived a long, hard life of drinking whiskey and smoking cigarettes. It's amazing.
It was really funny when we in the early days of us introducing the song of the week. You had that recommendation from Nathaniel Braithwaite or whatever what's his name? Ratcliffe.
Yeah, Ratcliffe. Yeah, Ratcliffe.
I watched the video of the song that you suggested, and I didn't know whether or not you were having a bit of fun because I thought it was you when I opened the video. You looked so much like you.
Yeah, that's why I chose it, man. It's just a good look.
Hey, people assassin me for calling it an MP3 player. Yeah, I am an old crotchety man. I'm the old man of the ForgeCast, and I still call it an MP3 player.
Okay, boomer.
I have a little iPod Nano, and it's been going strong, and I like it because it has Bluetooth, and I wear my Bluetooth hearing protection, so I can just leave that sitting. Still connected to a battery backup because it's so old that the battery doesn't last on it.
Yeah. Talking about,
yeah, that sort of thing.
Got my Bluetooth headset right here. 3M Work Tunes. Not sponsored.
It's funny how that sort of thing's gone because I bought my first MP3 player so long ago, and it had a 32 meg memory on it, and I was super impressed that it could do that. And it plugged in via USB, and it cost me hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And now you can get bloody 64 gig things, and yeah, Everyone
I had
tries
one of
me.
the I had one of the OG iPods, like way back in the day when they
click
first
wheel.
started. Yeah, the click wheel. God, that was a brick. In comparison to some of the modern, I got given an iPod Touch a while back. A couple, it's like an 8 gigabyte iPod Touch, and they're tiny. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. Technology is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with it, but it's amazing.
Yeah, everyone tries to convert me to Spotify, and I'm just, can't do it. I'm too old, too crotchety. It scares me. You youths and your Spotify and your WhatsApp. Dan was trying to get me onto WhatsApp this morning. I'm too old. So.
Yeah, I used WhatsApp for like 5 minutes. My mum made me download it because she was traveling over to Egypt and she wanted a way to contact me that was better than, texting and stuff like that from the Middle East.
Daniel Moss actually had a mini disc player. That was a short-lived fad. That came out at the worst time. Like everyone had a Discman, and then mini disc came out, and the mini disc lasted for about 2 weeks before the first MP3 player was released. And I can imagine everybody at the mini disc factory was like, "Argh!"
You imagine they probably spent like a year in research and development, building all the tooling and all that kind of stuff.
Bob, I do TikTok, yes, and it makes me feel very old every time that I use it. I feel ancient. Like, you can see my face wizening and my hair going grey the longer I use it. It just makes me feel like such an old man. But you got to market yourself, so I'm on the TikTok. And I've gone viral a couple of times, which is good.
Damn TikTokers.
Man. I need to start wearing crop tops and doing dances to be popular on there. All out. Makes me feel so old. And it makes me glad I'm not a parent.
Yeah.
Do I remember the Walkman? Yeah, I do remember the Walkman. And do you know that Sony still makes a Walkman, except it's now digital and uses MP3s?
Right.
And it's considered one of the, like, every time you do go and see, like, the top 10 MP3 players of 2020 and all that sort of thing, Sony Walkman is always, like, in the top 3. Like, apparently it's a quality product. Yeah, Daniel, we're the same age and we're both crotchety old men.
Yeah.
Sam's
I can agree with that.
He's only a little fella.
I'm not even in my 30s yet.
No. But, not that old, Frank says. Yeah. So, we've also spread out. We've got a few inspirations of the week, just to spread out through the episode. And we like shouting people out. We are shouting out awesome people. So, the first one for the week for me is actually somebody that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. Is actually John Switzer over at Black Bear Forge. I can't believe that I haven't yet shouted him out as an inspiration.
I can't believe none of us have.
I know. I actually have a video on my channel from ages ago of the people who inspired me on YouTube when I first started out in my career in blacksmithing. I'm pretty sure John Switzer was actually the first one on that list. He's just clear, he's thorough, he's not scared to show failures, he's a really friendly bloke who's just genuinely passionate about his craft, and it's kind of addictive to watch him because it inspires the passion in you, and it makes you he shows you sometimes fairly complex things, at least when you're first starting out, and it makes you feel like you could do them. Because he's also not scared to try new things and show old ways of doing things and comparing them to new ways and all that sort of thing. And he's it's just one of the best channels on YouTube for anybody starting out and anybody that's been doing it for a long time, purely because he does beautiful work and it's just nice to watch.
Yeah, I really love his no-nonsense approach to Forge work. Like, he really doesn't kind of arts it up or anything like that. He just does what he does. Mm-hmm. I love it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John, if you ever actually do watch this, that you have not yet come up as an inspiration, but it's just that you've been such a persistent one that sort of, just fades.
That's right. We'll have him on the show at some point.
Yeah, I'd like to. He did participate in my Mank Tank challenge, which was hilarious.
Yeah. When the stars align, we'll have John on.
Yeah, John's a very busy man, and understandably so. Like, he gets a lot done. He makes us look so lazy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I always feel kind of downtrodden by those people that keep uploading photos of their work like every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how are you keeping up with this production schedule?
It's like a constant stream of cocaine giving you energy or something, because I don't know how they do it.
So it's probably obvious to those people watching that I just woke up like half an hour ago.
Mm.
I literally did, because it's like 7 o'clock in the morning over here.
So, how about you, Sam? Who's your first inspiration of the week?
My first inspiration of the week is a person that I definitely had prior to being asked this question. No. No, so my inspiration this week is a mastersmith. Is he a mastersmith? He might just be a journeyman. Crap. I can't remember.
Just a journeyman.
Just a journeyman. Yeah, no, he he should be a mastersmith, even if he's not. He is a fantastic bladesmith, and he makes some ridiculous stuff. Like when I normally say ridiculous Damascus, you know, there's a few people who come to mind, and Salem Stroud is one of them. Now, for those of you who don't know who Salem Stroud is, he did win Forged in Fire at some point, but he's well known for doing crazy Damascus stuff. And when I say crazy Damascus, like, I'm not just talking mosaics. He made this pattern called the Zangier pattern, which to this day, and I still don't know how he does it. Like, okay, so I know how he does it because he's done Instagram posts on how he did it, but I still don't know how he does it. Because he folds the Damascus so that it basically makes like a straight layer Damascus, and then folds it so it folds back on itself, but then comes out and goes back like that, and it repeats. So it kind of looks like little mushrooms. It's hard to explain. You just have to go on his...
I'm just trying to look it up. What's his... Is he on Instagram?
Yes. I think he's Salem Stroud. Just Salem Stroud Knives.
It is, yeah.
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 He's done like kitchen knives with it and stuff like that. And one of the things that really inspired me, it's not so recently, it was like a year ago, he made a dagger. But with this dagger, he made the blade entirely etched, including the tang, all the way through the handle. And the handle was like 18 or 20 different pieces. And it was all of these hand-filed, like, bars of Damascus that made a basket around the tang.
Wow.
But you could see through the basket to the tang. So you could see the tang Damascus through the bars. And the bars were all, like, hand-filed. They all had, like, little accent stuff. And they were all Damascus as well. It just... That whole dagger was just ridiculous. Like, I was just like...
That's like taking our basket twist challenge to the extreme.
Yeah, it's crazy. I friggin' hate him. But no, he makes some absolutely stunning work, and the Zangier Damascus is just one of those kind of things that really gets me when I look at his work.
Yep.
And he's also not afraid to show his failings. Like when he actually did a Zangier Damascus kitchen knife billet, and the billet completely delaminated on him. And he, put that up in there, and he was like, "See, it happens to me too."
It does. It happens to everybody.
And he was the master to Will Stelter. Will Stelter. He's Will Stelter's mentor. So
another great smith.
Indeed, who's been an inspiration on the channel before.
That's right, of mine.
Of yours, indeed.
And we'd love to get him on the show, but he's just impossible to get in contact with. I imagine he has people messaging him like 24/7, just constant inundation of...
He is a busy, busy boy. You got to keep up with Alex Steele and, keeping up with that energy level. I do not envy him at all.
Just thinking about it makes me tired.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah,
love to
seriously.
have the energy that Alex Steele has. I would just, I'd kill for it.
Mate, I would kill to have like a tenth of that.
Yeah, I know, right? We'll get some stuff done.
I don't think I could handle all of Alex's energy because I think it'd just bounce off the
Is
walls.
it like the Infinity Gauntlet?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you become like that Charlie Sheen meme, like, dude, can't handle it.
That's right. Maybe he's
Oh,
banging 7
Sean.
gram rocks. Who knows?
Oh man, winning. Perfect timing. Jinx. Can't talk for the rest of the show.
Oh, we've already blocked your audio once.
Oh, well, this is true.
So guys, it's awesome to see so many people here. We've got 48 people. We had 52 before. I must have bored a couple of people.
Yeah,
Been trying to keep up with what you're saying. I'm not sure if Sam's going his. Yeah, Sam's drinking Black Rifle coffee that he was actually sent by one of his patrons.
I am. I put the cup down. There it is.
Yeah, people thought I was
drinking. It's my medical. It's my medical coffee.
Need to get you a ForgeCast mug, Sam.
Yeah, okay. Send me one.
And everybody else should be drinking from ForgeCast mugs as well. I mean, you're here, so
That's
you're a
it.
fan of the show, so get onto it.
Yeah. ForgeCast mugs available at Valhalla Iron on Redbubble.
Oddwood Forge is actually using a Blacksmith Forge mug, so that's pretty awesome.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Dan, the name was Salem Stroud. Salem is in like the town of Salem, and Straub, Straub.
I just put it into the chat, so hopefully people can see it there. But yeah, it's so good to see everybody here. And if you guys, normally we have our question of the week that people.
You misspelled Straub.
Did I?
Straub.
Did I?
Yeah, and it's OUB. You put OUB.
Yeah,
So don't listen to Alex.
There we go. So, are you going to Steamfest this weekend? No, I'm not, Featherhorse Forge. I am going to be in a couple of weekends going to the St. Patrick's Day Festival in Westbury, but I'm not going to be at Steamfest.
Alex doesn't travel more than like 5 minutes away from his house, and being that he's in the middle of nowhere.
It takes me several minutes of driving at high speed just to get to a road that actually goes anywhere. I live really in the middle of absolute.
Yeah, Tasmania looks small, but it's still the size of the UK.
It's huge.
What?
It's almost identical in landmass to Ireland.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
there you go.
Almost identical, just shaped differently.
Yeah, well, I mean, to give people an idea of WA, you can fit the entirety of the UK into Western Australia 7 times.
Yeah.
So, like anyone who lives in England right now, your entire island, including Scotland and Wales, will fit into my state 7 times.
So it's it's a common trope here that people think that Tasmania is so small you can walk across it and things, and you could, but it would take you several days, and you'd probably die. Because
I have a.
Oh, do you have Shadow?
I do.
Getting extra live stream points because of Doggo.
She is.
Hi, Shadow.
Yeah.
Oh, she's so
nice. She's
Yeah.
slowly pushed the door open, making sure she should come in. She's had a rough couple of days with all the lightning and thunder.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
She absolutely hates it.
Yeah.
All right, out. Thank you.
I wonder if that's a blue healer thing, because the farm dog here, Macy, who's appeared in a few of my Instagram posts, is part blue healer, and she's terrified of storms as well.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a blue healer thing or just a neurotic dog thing. Yeah, Vinny, there is about a 15 to 20 second delay between video and the chat, so...
Yeah, the reason we've done that is because it means that we don't have as much frame drop and sort of jitteriness when the fluctuations in internet speed happen. Having the delay lets it sort of consolidate and you guys get a nice, smooth stream.
That's it. Otherwise, you guys would be seeing 1 second.
Yeah, Techron wants to know if you're still doing your live stream today, Sam.
I will not. No, I won't.
People can't get enough of you, Sam.
Yeah, well, by the time this ends, it'll probably be 10 o'clock already anyway.
You gotta go straight in, just roll straight
But,
into it, Sam. No rest for the wicked.
yeah, totally. Yeah, oh, Christ. No, I do have a fellow blacksmith coming over today. Shout out to Jack Rigby, who's coming over to hang out in the forge and do some work. So we'll be doing that, but I won't be live streaming it. Sorry, guys.
Daniel, I agree with you. I can't work out what the deal is with Damascus either. It's it offers no practical benefit to the work. It's just for the pretties, and I think it's more just a testament to the skill of the smith. Really, it's showing off what you're capable of, which is a valid thing because it's difficult. Even the best of us actually will fail with Damascus billets.
And that's exactly right. Within the ABS, it's funny because a lot of people think that the ABS puts a lot of emphasis on Damascus, and that's mainly because most of the mastersmiths make Damascus. But at the journeyman level and the apprentice level, you're not even allowed to make Damascus for your test knives. Not even for the fittings. You know, nothing on the blade can be Damascus for any of your journeyman test knives, and the reason for that is because part of the ABS thing is function over form. But that being said, once you get to mastersmith level, they expect Damascus out of you because you've already proven that you can do function, but you need to be able now to do form with the function. And Damascus, I keep telling people, Damascus actually makes blades worse.
Yeah.
In like 99% of the time, making Damascus to make a knife makes the knife worse than if you just made it out of monosteel. Because you're risking inclusions, you're risking delaminations, you've got weld seams through your billet, and no matter how much carbon migration you get between those two, they're never going to be as solid as a single piece of crucible steel. So in Damascus, you're basically saying, I can make as functional a knife as monosteel with all of these layers in it. And so, yeah, I mean, Damascus is one of those things where you can show off your ability to make pretty looking stuff that also is functional. Unfortunately, some people seem to think that if you make Damascus, you don't need to worry about the function anymore.
I'm actually more of a fan of something like a Hamon, simply because it's very beautiful if done right, but also shows a functionality difference of the actual piece. It's that difference between the soft spine and the hard edge. Actually, it is a function of a knife. It gives it strength. And you can visually see a functional aspect of the knife in a beautiful means. So I think it's because it's a twofer. It's not just prettier. It's pretty and more functional.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, more functional is relative. I like Hamons. I'm a huge fan of Hamons, but at the same time, on this hunting knife, for instance, once I sharpen past that Hamon line, which you can actually see in the camera, that's kind of cool. Once I sharpen past that, it's now just a soft piece of steel. So this will never be one of those granddad's knives where you've, sharpened through that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So we actually have a question. We have a question that is Damascus related here. Adam is actually asking, if heating metal creates scale and scale inhibits welds, why doesn't creating a sealed Damascus billet using a weld barrier create a massive inclusion inside of the final billet? So I suppose, does the heat of a welder create scale on the inside? That's interesting.
No, it normally doesn't. Now, one of the things that you've got to remember is that there will be a tiny bit of oxygen in a sealed billet anyway, and that oxygen will react with the air inside the billet, with the steel inside the billet, to create oxide. But the oxide layer will be so thin that it won't be able to inhibit the weld. The big thing is that when you're welding the billet closed, most of the oxide is on the outside of that weld, not on the inside. And if you're welding to the point that you're heating the steel past its scaling point, you're doing something wrong. It's much preferable to do it with like a gassed MIG or a TIG, where you've got the argon gas protecting the steel, which means that you're not going to get any oxide anyway. But Yeah, I know some people who actually flush their billets with argon before they seal it up.
Oh, wow.
So that it's completely oxygen free.
Yeah, right. Well, that's
Yep.
interesting. It does. You should always, even when you're doing a sealed billet, ensure that the pieces of steel that you're stacking up are as flat as humanly possible.
As close as humanly possible, yeah, because then you limit the amount of air that's in the billet
Because if there's not
welding.
air, there's not scale forming. It's just how it works, really.
Yeah.
Not in that level of heat that you're dealing with a welder. So, interesting question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Adam. The other thing is that obviously you want to grind out your welds before you do anything with the billet. You don't want to leave that welded material in the billet, in the final billet, before you make a knife, because it's normally unhardenable.
And the scale would form close to that.
Yep.
If it was to scale. So Daniel Moss reckons that Damascus. He reckons he's sure it's not that hard. Is that why, Daniel, that you've got so many Damascus projects on your channel?
Exactly.
It's just that the thing is, and Sam and I were talking about this the other day, when you create those forge welds of the different layers of steel, you're not making one homogeneous piece of steel. It's still kind of different pieces, and there's still sort of seams there that can tear apart if you twist it too much or put too much strain on it. And because of that, if you just want to take layers of steel, forge down a normal like mosaic or random pattern Damascus, that way it's less likely that those things are going to happen. But some of the more complicated Damascus patterns require bending, twisting, shaping, cutting, smushing in various ways that create huge amounts of shear differences. And don't forget that grain growth in different steels happens at different rates. And so you've got these like complementary, or not complementary, or what's the opposite of complementary? Competitive, opposing torsions throughout the steel as you're heating and quenching and all that sort of thing, and cracks and blowouts. The risk of them is high in knife making anyway if you're not normalizing properly and all that sort of thing. You're dealing with such thin profiles of steel, and quenching is a very aggressive process. So as soon as you implement Damascus into that, then all of a sudden your risk factor goes up by a factor of 10.
And that's it. And I mean, Daniel did follow up with a second question, which is why forge when you can just stock remove. And while you don't actually have to forge, there's nothing saying you have to. There are a lot of people who just make stock remove knives, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to make a knife out of inch by quarter inch bar, but you want it to be inch and a quarter wide, you can't grind an inch and a quarter wide blade out of an inch wide bar.
Yeah.
One of the big things for me about being a bladesmith over being a knife maker is that I can take literally any shape of stock, whether it be round stock, whether it be square stock, whether it be a block of steel, and I can turn it into a knife. Whereas as a knife maker, you are limited to only using bars of steel.
Yes.
So there's nothing wrong with stock removal, and I know quite a few stock removal knife makers who make absolutely spectacular work. But yeah, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But I prefer to forge because I really like hitting hot steel, which should be obvious because I also make hammers and axes and stuff like that. But I also enjoy being able to use any size or shape of material that I like.
I actually go through this on my known steel versus scrap steel video, and it was I listed as one of the downsides of using known steel, because if you are using known steel, you're just taking a bar, you can just get the size bar of the exact steel that you need to basically shape it into knife form, but one of the benefits of scrap steel that known steel doesn't have is exactly what Sam says. You can breathe new life into something old and forgotten about that other people would consider trash, like an old file or a farrier's rasp or something that would otherwise end up being melted down or thrown into a landfill. You can, with just some time, effort, and love, you can turn it into something that could turn into a family heirloom. It's something that you can,
that's it.
You can give it magic back again and turn it into a functional thing. You can't do that with basically stock removing from known steel bar. And while I tend to be a bit of a controversial figure in some circles with my advocacy of scrap steel, I also use known steel when I need it to work a certain way. I only use scrap steel when I really want to do that particular thing of turning something old into something new, just because I like the artistry of it, really.
Yeah, and I mean, even when using known steel, like I get, I have some 30 by 20, which is inch and a quarter by like 7/8 or something like that. No, it's 3/4, so inch and a quarter by 3/4, 1084. So it's a chunky bar, and I can turn that into a knife. You know, like a stock removalist could do that, but they'd only be able to make a 30 mil tall blade with an integral bolster if you wanted to. If you want to make integrals, forging is basically the only way to go. So, you know, like I buy round stock to make integrals out of. I couldn't make an integral. Well, I mean, I suppose I could.
But it'd be a lot of loss, a lot of material loss.
It'd be a hell of a lot of material loss. And not only that, but I'd only be limited to the size of the stock.
And that I mean, that works even if you're not doing integrals. If you're doing stock removal knives from rectangular bar, the amount of stock that you lose is massively increased over forging it to shape.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I wanted to make a 6-inch blade with a 1-inch bolster and a 4-inch tang, or say let's do a through tang, a 6-inch tang, I would have to use, you know, 6, and 1 is 13 inches of that bar to make the knife, which is no short task, because, you know, that's, you know, that much of a bar, which is kind of stupid, because then at that point, 30 mil by 20 mil, I'd be removing, to make, like, even a 6 mil spine, I'd be removing, what is that, like 14 mil of steel from either side. Yeah. And then I've got to do the bevels. And then for the tang, like, that's even worse, because the tang will be 6 mil thick, but it'll also only be, like, you know, 10 mil tall. So I'll be removing, you know, like a couple kilos of steel off this bar. And most of the 1084 bars that are like 30 by 20 that you get are only 20 inches long. So I'd only get one knife out of it as a knife maker, whereas as a bladesmith, I can make 3 or 4 knives out of it just by forging.
Champ Ironworks has actually said that in the US, if someone shatters a scrap steel item and is hurt, they're coming for your house. That's really not the case here in Australia, Champ. I'm sorry that you have to deal with that. That sounds awful.
I mean, there is liability. That's what liability insurance is for.
Yeah.
Like, literally, that is what liability insurance is for. I'm covered by liability up to $20 million. So, the big thing is that anyone who's using a scrap steel blade should know what it is. Like, one of the big arguments we get into is people who sell scrap steel items saying that they're something they're not, right? Like this Sloyd knife that I made, if I hold it up to the camera, it should be obvious that it was made out of a file. Now, I wouldn't sell this knife saying it was a W2 Sloyd knife. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's a 1095 Sloyd knife. I'm going to say it's a file steel for Sloyd knife. Does that make it any worse? No, it just means that, you know, it's file steel. It's a used item. It was a file. Now it's a knife. And so then you're going to be taking the responsibility onto yourself as a customer to know, okay, this was a, you know, scrap piece of steel, and you should know what that entails, or at least the seller should be able to make you aware of what that entails. Anyone who ends up, you know, like selling something like a leaf spring Bowie or something like that, or a leaf spring machete, and saying it's 5160 is immediately opening themselves up to litigation.
Yeah.
Because they can't guarantee that that's the alloy. And they're not informing that person that it has had a previous life.
And even just take it separate from the litigation side of things, it's just immoral, really, for saying something is something that it's not. And it's another thing I go into in that video of the scrap versus known steel. It's just immoral to actually say that something is what it's not. And from just a marketing perspective, there are many people out there that actually would like a knife that is made out of something old. They actually would find it more appealing from a buyer perspective to say this was forged from an old truck leaf spring than they would if you said this is forged from, virgin 1095.
Well, and that's it. But then there are cases like my Hexhawks. And these Hexhawks are forged from 1.25" hex bar that used to be industrial jackhammer bits. Now, back when I first started selling them, when people asked what they were made of, I would say industrial jackhammer bits. Now I've had the jackhammer bits spectroscopically analyzed, and I've had several of them analyzed, and they all came back with the same. They are 1070. And so now I can advertise them as 1070 because it is 1070. That doesn't mean that they didn't have a previous life, and a lot of the time I will kind of just say, by the way, it was a jackhammer bit at some point. But realistically, I should be testing all of my work anyway.
Yeah.
And Alex and I are giant advocates, huge advocates of over-testing. Testing beyond what you should be expecting your customer to do. Because at that point, you then have what's called the idiot-proof warranty, which is if someone does something stupid with something that I've made and hurts themselves, unless they can prove to me that they were using it for its intended purpose, I'm not covering that. And I'll go to court over it. I've had people buy a kitchen knife or a very, very thin, petty kitchen knife off me and then try and use it to pry jar lids off and stuff like that and snap the tip off.
Yeah.
And then they've come to me saying, I want you to fix it. And I've said, well, no. Or, yes, I'll fix it, but you're paying for it because it's not a goddamn pry bar.
Was it you who made the Bowie knife that somebody kept on their mantle and used as a fireplace poker?
No. Not that I'm aware of.
Somebody else must have told me that story. It was like a $700 Bowie knife. They bought it, and then they found out that it was all blackened and detempered and everything, and they'd been using it as a bloody fireplace poker.
Yeah, Techron makes a good point. Signed waivers don't do bugger all, unless they're countersigned by a lawyer.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, the fact is you can't sign away your right to do something that will cause a law to be broken. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's just not a legal fact in pretty much any country that I'm aware of.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
otherwise the world would be a much more interesting place. even liability waivers where you get someone to say, I'm doing something dangerous and therefore can potentially harm myself, unless that has been countersigned by a lawyer or a justice of the peace.
Or the justice of the peace, someone who understands law, then it doesn't mean bugger all. It's not worth the paper it's printed on. Like, for instance, in the Medieval Reenactment Society, the SCA, they have a liability waiver that you have to sign in order to become a member. Because they have insurance, but it doesn't cover you for a lot of things in order to keep the cost down. But that's been countersigned by like 3 different lawyers before you sign it. Because that way it's, signed into law, basically, that you're covered.
Yeah. So, Hans is Sassinus reckons that knife makers think that they're better than normal smiths.
I've never heard that. Actually, I've experienced the exact opposite.
Anyone that's ever seen Sam trying to forge a scroll? No.
Yeah.
Or me trying to forge a knife, really.
But I mean, the big thing for me is that, I've experienced the exact opposite. I've actually experienced blacksmiths who will look down on me for being a bladesmith. Despite the fact that I do a hell of a lot of blacksmithing, making axes and tongs and hammers and stuff like that, they'll still say, "Oh, you've got bladesmith in your name, so therefore it's you're a lesser creature because only noobs and retards want to become bladesmiths." And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that there's a lot of young people who are getting into bladesmithing because they want to make swords and knives and cool stuff. And so a lot of the traditional blacksmiths tend to be on the older side, and more into the tradition of the work and making tools and all that kind of stuff, which is really cool. But then they look at the young bladesmiths and all this kind of stuff, and they kind of go, "Oh, these young kids
Yeah,
with their confounded flat pointy stuff.
The fact is, every industry, no matter what it is, has the gatekeepers in it that, or the self-proclaimed gatekeepers that actually they can't do anything really, but they like to pretend that they do. It's just going to happen in any industry. Just ignore people like that. Knife makers are no better than blacksmiths. Blacksmiths are no better than knife makers. It all comes down to the individual and the work that they produce in their chosen field. All comes down to how good the end result is.
That's not blacksmithing. Daniel's gatekeeping me.
There's tool making.
Well, yeah, okay, technically it's tool making, but
he also makes bottle openers.
For a long time, blacksmithing covered all of that because blacksmithing was simply working with iron.
That's it.
The whole idea of blacksmith was, black was the color the steel turned.
Dan, a plow is a tool.
It is. A plow is a tool.
You sass us, we sass you right back.
And I've also forged hinges and door handles, and I've forged brackets and all that kind of shit, shelving. I've done all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So don't gatekeep me out of the blacksmithing community. Sorry, mate. You lose.
That's it. Nah, he loves it. I know he does.
Just because I'm a bladesmith doesn't mean I can't do the rest, and it doesn't mean that I'm not interested in the rest. It's just that I like sharp stuff.
He does. There is a undeniable artistry to the perfectionism that is the knife making industry, but there is no less perfectionism that can be attained in blacksmithing, and some smiths out there are living proof of that. Dan himself, looking at the tongs that he makes, is living proof of that. I have no idea how he gets to the level that he does with these tongs.
Yep.
So.
Although I will argue, Dan, that tool makers these days are machinists. If you are a professional tool maker, normally or a tool fitter, you are normally a fitter and turner.
Nowadays,
yeah. And most of it's stock removal. Like lathe tooling and mill tooling and stuff like that. If you're a tool maker, normally these days you're making lathe and mill tools and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
But then again, you watch Craig Turniker make a pair of tongs in like 5 minutes flat.
Oh yeah, and the big thing is you could argue that Craig Turniker's a farrier.
Yeah.
Except that he's never shoot a horse in his life.
Really?
Yeah, he's not a farrier. He's a blacksmith. Yeah. Craig Turniker runs the WCB, the World Champion Blacksmiths. And, most of what they do is forge horseshoes and stuff like that. But Craig Turniker himself is not a farrier. He's a blacksmith.
There you go. Another person we would very much love to have on the show at some point.
Yes, definitely a guy that we want to get in touch with.
Hopefully he doesn't talk as fast as he forges. The show would be over in 10 minutes flat.
Man can certainly swing a hammer, that's for sure.
He certainly can.
Oh, scary dude.
Yeah, so guys, we do have some questions that have been emailed in to us, but this is a phenomenal chance for you guys to, if you have any questions about blacksmithing or bladesmithing, to drop them in the comments here, and we can actually answer them in real time. Hopefully, keep up with them. We do apologize. We've got a lot of people in the chat at the moment, and we're trying our best to keep up with what everybody's saying. But if we miss things, we do apologize. But yeah, if you do have any questions for us, drop them there and we will definitely get into them. But for now, we do have a few that have been emailed into us. So Gideon at Back 40 Forge has actually emailed us and said, any advice for making a kukri out of a piece of leaf spring? Any advice would be greatly appreciated.
Don't.
Now,
just kidding.
Sam has a very different perspective on this to me, because I consider there are 3 different knives that are just really going to push your skills to make nicely. One is a straight razor, one is a chef knife, and the third one is a kukri. Especially if you're going to do hammered bevels and all that sort of thing. Preform is everything. You have to understand the concept of preform. You have to understand the theory of preform. And was it JLP Services? I'm trying to remember. That YouTube channel that very talented.
JLP, yeah.
She did a video a short while ago on preform theory.
Mm.
Highly recommend subscribing to her channel and checking it out. But preform is everything if you're going to be doing hand-forged bevels on the Kukri. And I actually found it's easier to do over the back of a horn of the anvil. And I found this out before Sam then told me that the Gurkha smiths who made them originally were making them on domed anvils, which makes a lot of sense. But I'll let Sam take over the theory because he is the expert on making kukris out of the two of us.
Yeah, no, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. Preform is everything, and that's true of all smithing, really. But especially in bladesmithing, preform is absolutely integral to getting a decent blade out of it, especially with integrals. But Kukri is, as some of you guys will know, I did a live stream forging a Kukri from start to finish, and a lot of the time it comes down to getting the shape that you want in the beginning. Now, Kukri covers a whole manner of sins, mainly because there are like several hundred different designs. Each kami has their own design and all that kind of stuff. You got the Sirapate and the M43 that HH Knives I think does. So yeah, there's quite a few different ways of doing a Kukri. I prefer something a bit shorter and a bit thicker, something that I can use as both a utility knife and a chopping tool. And one of the things I love about Kukris is that they are kind of the multi-tool of the fixed blade world. They're fantastically useful. But yeah, as Alex said, they are forged on domed anvils, which is why when you buy a traditional Kukri, a lot of the time they will have almost like a giant hollow in the spine. They'll kind of go from spine, they'll hollow in and then out, and then they'll come down to a bevel, almost like a Scandinavian bevel, but more convex. And the reason for that is because when they forge the Kukri itself, they forge over a horn, well, not over a horn, a domed anvil using rounded hammers. So there's a lot of kind of opposing convex surfaces creating those kinds of things. If you watch a lot of videos on Kukri forging, a lot of the time they'll take a leaf spring and they'll cut the shape or two opposing shapes out of one piece of leaf spring that are in the rough shape of a Kukri. I haven't done that. I just forged it straight out of a piece of bar stock. First, point it. Second, get your profile, which you'll want slightly thicker at the front, slightly thinner at the back with a slight recurve. And you want to pre-curve your blade. Now, I don't pre-curve a lot, but in something that has a forward sweep, you definitely need to pre-curve. Like karambits and stuff like that, you desperately need to pre-curve, because if you don't, you're going to be fighting that to try and get it back to a forward curve rather than a reverse curve. And one of the problems with, like, I normally don't pre-curve my straight blades because it doesn't really fold the edge too much if you just straighten it up again. But when you're trying to recurve an unprecurved blade, you'll end up getting an accordion edge because the edge will want to be pushed back in on itself. And so you're just going to end up fighting your own work. So pre-curve, definitely. And yeah, forging over some form of slightly convex surface is a good idea. But if you can't do that, forge it over the horn. The wider you make your Kukri, the less convex you need it.
If you make monster Kukris like Sam does.
if you make standard size Kukris like I do, then you can actually forge it on a flat anvil, which I did. It just requires a little bit more hammer control.
Yeah. So Wiley at Archangel Craftworks has actually said practice hammering clay at works. I'm a big advocate for that. It's a really good way to actually see how the steel will move. It's not super accurate, but it gives you a really good indication.
Yeah, clay, plasticine, something like that.
Yeah.
You can even make Play-Doh.
Clay. Yeah, oil-based clay or plasticine seems to be the best for doing that. I actually keep containers in my forge of sort of made up round stock, square stock, cube stock, bar stock, that sort of thing, out of plasticine, so that when I'm demonstrating something, I can pull out the appropriate stock. It's just pre-made, ready to go, and then forge on it. And I recently did a video of making a wooden hammer to practice your hammering with that, because that way you can focus a bit more on your hammer control, which you can't really do if you're using an actual forging hammer on plasticine.
something that one of my patrons, Nick Stent, pointed out is that's fantastic for teaching kids forging as well. If you want to get your kid out to the forge without heating up some steel, then you can get them to use a wooden hammer on clay.
Yeah, that's right. You could even make a little wooden anvil.
Yeah, that's it. So, you can get them doing things safely in the forge, but also still learning how to smack things so that when they're older, they can actually make stuff.
Yeah. So 573 Knives has asked, what is your go-to blacksmith finish? Beeswax, linseed, etc. It depends on the application for me.
Me too.
Beeswax finish leaves a kind of... well, beeswax, you basically you put on once, you get it nice and even while you're putting it on, and it's the way it is. Linseed you can play a bit more with. You can sort of apply it, burn it off, and you start getting a really deep blackening that's very smooth. You don't get a tacky finish like you do if you just do one layer and slap it on. Beeswax finishes tend to be a little bit like that, but beeswax, I find, if it gets sort of scratched or roughed up, starts going pale and white and grainy after a while. It's more it's for set and forget things.
Yeah, for me, beeswax is kind of a storage finish more than anything. Something that's going to be hanging out somewhere for a long period of time is not going to be handled or anything like that. I also use it on stuff like axes occasionally, purely because you can reapply relatively easily. But yeah, I tend to go back to linseed oil when I'm doing blacksmith fittings and stuff like that, or finish for fittings. When I made the shelving unit for my wife, all of the brackets were blacksmith finished with just linseed oil and the low heat.
One thing that I like to do is actually either a wire wheel finish or an acid etched finish, which is then hit the high spots with some 400 grit to pop the detail. And do that, and either of those two I'll finish with clear coat. Tends to work quite well for me.
Yeah, I haven't really played around with doing clear coat on stuff, mostly because most of the stuff I make is to be used, and clear coat would fracture quite easily.
Yeah, it depends on what it is. My hairpins I finish with clear coat because it's not going to be under the sort of stress that does fracture the clear coat.
Oh yeah, well yeah, in that case, sure, but you wouldn't want to clear coat a set of tongs or something.
No, it wouldn't work well.
So for me that's not necessary. But so the linseed oil is pretty much my standard. When I'm doing brute to forge finishes on blades like this one, there is basically no finish. That's just the raw steel, and that's because that blade is going to be oiled over its lifetime, hopefully.
So Paul Fontanini likes to use Blacksmith Goop, which is, for those who don't follow, is a mix of beeswax, linseed, and terps, or white spirits. It's a good finish. It's a nice way to do it. You don't get quite as much of the tackiness that the boiled linseed finishes can have. To get a good blacksmith finish with linseed oil, it's patience. A lot of people think that it's just, heat it up, dab it on with a rag, and you're good. That will leave a black finish, but it'll be an awful black finish.
Yeah. You got to do wax on, wax off. Yeah. Sometimes you have to remove a little bit of the excess. A lot of the time, I see people doing that kind of stuff, and they literally just slather it on.
Yeah.
And you see drips of it coming off as it smokes. And,
yeah.
And then you get really large chunks of linseed oil or beeswax, whatever it is, hardening in droplets.
The next time you guys are going to do it, try doing multiple coats. Literally put it on like you would, and then burn it off. Don't put it in your forge, but over your forge, let that heat just melt it right off again, and then do another coat. And do this 3 or 4 times, and you will be surprised at how beautiful a finish you can actually get on your work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do the blacksmith's finish on my rapier hilts, which I didn't bring my rapier in here with me. But it is incredibly hard wearing. Yeah, I just literally brought off my workshop in here. But it is a very durable finish as well. Mine's been knocked around quite a bit, and it's still just as black as when it started.
Yeah, you do have to be careful putting on the linseed finish, because you can cause some pretty severe hand burns if you're not careful with it.
Yeah, especially if you've overheated the steel a little bit when you apply it, and it's still in that dull red phase. It's a really good way to drop burning linseed oil onto yourself, which is so much fun.
Or as my student Adam found out the hard way, dripping beeswax up onto your fingernails is always fun.
Yeah.
So Daniel
That's the
Moss
same.
puts a hot wire brush and then hot linseed oil and then dry beeswaxes his tongs. So it's good for storage, but that beeswax I reckon would melt off in use. But tongs are good
Yeah.
because they don't really get a chance to oxidize if you're using them regularly.
I really don't like wax finishes in my workshop, mainly because they just collect dust. Like, and it's almost impossible to get off. Like the linseed oil finish, I find is actually relatively easy to clean, especially if you haven't got it tacky. If you've done it properly, it should be a relatively hard, shiny coat almost. Whereas with most waxes, you end up with a slight tackiness to it, and they just pick up everything in the workshop.
Well, that's it. I mean, if your wax finish is still on your tools, it means you're not using your tools enough. You should use your tools more.
Yeah. That's
So,
it.
yeah. So hopefully that was that. So what's this? Inconvenient Skills asks, what is a good way to finish long pieces like campfire irons? Well, that is actually an interesting question because using things that are going to be used in fire is a little bit like seasoning a pan. If you've ever worked with cast iron pots and pans, you have to keep them seasoned in order to prevent rust and make them work well. And steel actually seasons just like cast iron, really. And if it's going to be used over a fire, then natural oils are a really great way to go with that sort of thing, like rice bran oil or peanut oil. Although if it's going to be stored for long periods, that oil can go rancid. This is something you've got to consider if you're going to be using the tool on the regular peanut oil, or you can even use coconut oil if you want.
or food safe mineral oil is the other way to go, because that doesn't go rancid at all.
True, that's true. It's a really good thing to actually have, and you can. It's not that. I have described in the past and gotten in trouble for it, but I've described steel as porous. It's not porous. It's an incorrect thing to say, but it's a good way to describe. Sort of, it opens up when you heat it in a way that allows it to sort of crystallize oil surfaces over the top if you do it correctly. It's a hard way to describe it, and saying that it's porous is just an easier, quick way to do it. It's not porous, but you really kind of want to capture the oil on the piece and in the piece sort of thing. And seasoning is essentially nothing absorbs into the steel. Seasoning creates a crystallized layer of oil that has been hardened and then cooled, liquefied and then cooled, liquefied and then cooled over the surface, creating a rust-proof barrier or moisture barrier. And the oil that you choose to do that is important.
Yeah, and as Daniel points out, if it's used, it's going to rub off. Like, if you're carrying it around and using it over a campfire quite regularly, any finish you put on there is going to come off. There's no way to keep it on there. The big thing is to maintain it. Most people don't care about their campfire tools and just let them rust after a while. And give them a scrub with a wire brush occasionally when they need to.
Yeah. Daniel actually makes a good point here. I mean, it's just part of your shop maintenance to go around all your tools, and not many people do it as often as they should. You know, I'm pretty guilty of that. I'm sort of a hit everything while it's on the rack with a can of WD-40 kind of guy, and it's the wrong way to do it, really. You really want a good quality oil that lasts a long time and resists the wear that is put under something like ballistol, but it's expensive. 3-in-1 oil is fantastic, really. It does a great job for a low price, very, very low price. And you should be maintaining your tools, because maintained tools last longer and they work for longer and they don't let you down.
That's true. Don't do what I do and just chuck them everywhere.
Oh, man. You can tell which tongs on my rack are used the most frequently.
Yep.
I have one pair there that's so rusted that it's probably attached to the rack at this point. It's like, the pirates on Davy Jones' ship.
It's become part of the ship, part of the crew.
That's it. So that's a topic. It's one of those things to do as I say, not as I do. Oil your tools, people.
That's it. Take care of them.
Yeah,
because they'll take care of you.
So, all right. See you, Speargrass.
Bye, Adam.
We'll be uploading the episode as a normal podcast eventually, probably in the next day or two. So Stefan has actually asked whether or not storing your tools in an oil bucket is a good way to go. And that's a kind of a messy way to go. That, like, yes, that would work. That would oil-proof your tools. But
if you're storing them for a couple of decades, then yeah, sure.
yeah, if you're really going to store them, though, I would soak a rag in oil and then wrap the tool in the rag and then stick it in a container somewhere. Because the thing is, you don't want tongs slipping out of your hands or hammers or anything, and oil makes things very slippy, very hard to hold on to.
You'd have to clean them off every time you wanted to use them, but that'd just be counterproductive.
Yeah.
No. If you're going to store them for a long time, as Alex said, you store them in an oily rag, and then they'll be fine. But
on the other side of things, if you are, say, storing a pre-prepared Damascus billet that has not yet been forge welded together, a good thing to actually store that in, which Sam actually recently taught me, is actually a sealed container of kerosene. And it's got to be sealed because kerosene acts as a solvent and a de-rustifier. And oxygen can't get to the steel if it is submerged in functional kerosene.
Yep. So. Frank Swearingen asks, what's the best way to do bevels? And the best way to do bevels is to hit them. So, I mean, it's really difficult to say best way to do bevels. It depends on what you're beveling.
Well, it also depends on the smith, really. I mean, like, Niels Vandenberg, who is an incredible smith, uses a rounding hammer.
Yep.
I would never do that.
No, not me.
But, like, nobody can dispute the fact that Niels Vandenberg is incredible at what he does. So it's sort of like, that's just how he do. I like a dog's head hammer.
Yeah, everyone finds their own kind of rhythm with beveling. I prefer dog's heads, as everyone should know by now. But the other thing is that obviously you've got the two different methods. You've got the method of compression, then you've got the method of pinching. And I did a video on how to forge bevels as an answer to That Works video. Ilya did a video on forging bevels. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, check out my channel, Samtown's Bladesmith, and you'll be able to find that video on there. But basically the short answer is you want to try and create the same angle from the stock to the anvil face as from the hammer to the stock. So basically you want to create about a 10-degree angle, let's say. That's not accurate at all, but about a 10-degree angle between the hammer face and the anvil face, and then you want to split the middle of that with your stock. That's basically the general gist of how to do it. You want to continually flip sides, so forging bevels from one side and then forging the bevels from the other, because that way you'll keep it straight and hopefully centered. But
while Sam is ranting about beveling, I'm just going to run to the bathroom.
Okay, you do that. You want to keep it relatively straight, and so forging from both sides evenly is going to be really important. Depending on what finish grind you're looking at making, then that'll depend on how high you go on the knife in your beveling. And then you also want to forge to an even edge thickness, so you want to be able to get a thickness that is say about for Americans, what would be like a dime's thickness or a nickel's thickness. I'm just scratching my hand. But yeah, so so you can grind them in. You can just do stock removal, but yeah, at the end of the day, if you're going to be doing bevels, then basically the rule is knife goes on the anvil at a slight angle to the anvil, hammer comes in at a slight angle to the blade. If you want to create a step from your ricasso to your edge, then you want to start the hammer blows, like halfway up the blade and move down. If you're wanting to push this back in, then you're going to want to throw the hammer from the side in. Like pinching, you can come straight down. Whereas with compression, you want to throw the hammer in basically sideways and push that material back towards the spine. And that's Ilya's preferred version of forging bevels. It's also good for swords. Very good for swords. And daggers.
Yeah, well, The rounding hammer, turning hammer debate has entered our chat.
Oh, God. Go away, Daniel.
No, I've been championing that. I like to annoy the crap out of Roy Adams because they go in every one of his live streams. They say it's turning hammer. No, stop calling it a rounding hammer. Yeah,
it's a rounding hammer until it's used for turning.
And that's it. Any hammer's a turning hammer if you're brave enough.
Well, I've noticed that we've been going for about an hour now, and we haven't jumped into a tool time.
Yeah, well, actually, we had a question earlier, and I can't remember who asked it now, but they asked, what is our favorite tool in the shop?
Favorite tool in the shop?
Yeah. I can't remember who asked it now. Sam loves files. Aaron Finn asked the question. So, yeah, Sam likes files.
It's hard to kind of pin down exactly my favorite. There are favorite for certain things, like my 20-ton press is one of my favorites for forging because it's just so fun to watch it do it. Hammers are obviously
all the work that you don't have to do now because it's just doing it for you.
Yeah, hammers are also one of my favorites, especially dog's heads. Anvils are really cool, but if I had to pick a favorite, if it was going to have to be something, it would have to be files. I am a massive file nerd.
Yep. Mine would have to be, it's a tie. I love handmade tools. I don't like shop-bought tools, and I try and fill my forge with as many handmade tools as possible. And I have several from Sam, and I have several from lots of other people, and really it's, I've got 2 handmade hammers. One's from Sam, it's a dog's head, and the other one's actually from Dan Moss. It's a turning hammer. And I
encourage him.
Like, you really notice the difference when you have a handmade hammer, when like that everything right down to the handle has been handmade is just awesome. And there's just a joy in use of handmade tools compared to something that you've just bought. It actually pains me that my the 3 hammers that I use the most in my forge, 2 of them are handmade and one of them is not. It's my 1.8 pound cross peen that I use. I don't have a handmade 1.8 pound cross peen, but it's probably one of the most used hammers because a lot of what I do is smaller, like the jewelry stuff, the hairpins and that sort of thing. And the dog's head really doesn't work well because I specifically mounted it on a cant so that it's good for beveling, or from the way my body works while beveling. And the turning hammer is just way too big to be using on 1/4-inch stock. So I use the 1.8 pound cross peen. And one day I will get a handmade one of those as well. But yeah, handmade tools, there is just an absolute joy that you don't get from a bought tool.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I suppose, yeah, now that you think about it, handmade tools of any kind are kind of my favorite. But,
Dan's still paranoid about the hand. It's fine, Dan. Ever since he sent me that hammer, he's like, I'm sorry in advance about the handle. Like, I've stuffed it. Nothing's gone wrong with it. It's perfectly fine.
Dan.
Stop bothering me. It's been 9 months.
Yeah. But, so that's the answer. I like handmade stuff too. Just saying. That's why I make it.
Yeah. Hey, Steve.
Although... Hi, Steve. Whoever Steve is. Which Steve?
Steve Sampson.
All right.
Yeah, Alien Monkey Forge.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, he's a fellow Aussie. So,
apparently one of your hammers is in risk of going missing.
One of mine?
Yeah.
Who's this? Oh, yeah. That's Adam. Adam loves Dan's hammer. He loves it so much.
Yep.
So... he knows the beauty of a handmade tool. Yamed said he saw a tool that drills square holes. That's pretty normal.
I've seen those.
They've been around for a long time.
Yeah, especially in wood. Wood, it's easy.
Well, that's right. Anybody that's done mortise and tenon things would... I mean, you can use chisels and things like that, but very quickly people are like, chiseling sucks, I'm going to build a tool.
That's it.
Evergreen Forgeworks says she's only got a 1x30 because she can't afford a 2x72. And I got to say, I used a 1x30 for a long time before I built Frankie. And you use them right, and they can be very effective. Like, it'll never replace a 2x72, not even close. But even after building Frankie, I still use my 1x30 for detail grinding because it's just that good.
Yep, sure.
The only downside to them is you cannot adjust the speed at all. You have flat out or stopped.
One of the things is you can run 1-inch belts on a 2x72. It's just you have to make it 1x72.
You have to strap two together.
Well, no, you just split one in half.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Because the belt will track. They actually make 1-inch serrated belts, the crimped belts, for doing like handle sanding and stuff.
Oh, yeah, yep.
I want to get some of those.
One thing to remember that a lot of people who run the 1x30s don't understand or don't know is that you can get an almost full range of belts for them. You can get zirconia belts, you can get ceramic belts, even Norton Blaze have belts for them. And they are out there. Don't just stick with the aluminium oxide ones. And most of the time when people think that a 1x30 can't do much work, it's that they've been using aluminium oxide belts on them, and they're just not that effective.
Alox is shit for steel.
But with a few key modifications, a 1x30 can be a very effective grinder.
Absolutely.
What else we got
Yeah.
here?
Everyone's just talking about 1x30s now. except Dan, who wants to know what kind of Swedish crossbeam you want.
Me?
A 1.8 Swedish.
1.8 pound Swedish crossbeam.
I believe 5 Pounds Fab did sell combat abrasive belts for a while, but they no longer have that contract.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I want Cubitron to start making 1x30s.
Oh, God.
I don't think the biggest downside to 1x30s that I've found, and really it's not belt size, and it's the power of the motors on 1x30s is usually around at the maximum about 450 watt, and it's not enough. The slightest. No. If you want to hog steel, you really got to get some pressure going. You want to get even bevels that you're grinding in. You got to get some pressure going, and you really want something like a 1.5 horse motor minimum on a 2x72 to be able to push it.
I would love to see a 1x30 with like a 3 horsepower motor. I'm just like, it'd basically be a difiler at that point.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It's they're great tools, and I to be honest, I use my 1x30 about the same amount as I use my 2x72. Although largely nowadays I use it for handle shaping. They're really, really nice for handle shaping.
So Dan Moss has got another question.
Yep.
Do you spot heat treat your blades, i.e. just quench the steel you want hard?
That's called an edge quench.
Yes, but no. So we don't call it spot heat treating. A lot of the time in like blacksmithing and stuff like that, if you have a wear surface, you might heat that specific surface with a torch and quench it.
Or in the case of particularly wide blades like the Serbian Almazan knife that I did recently, you can, because the blade section is so wide, you'll heat just the edge and then quench the entire thing.
Yep. So. But yeah, so you can edge quench your blades, and I did a whole video on how to like do different heat treats and stuff, and edge quenching was one of them. I don't like it because it creates a stress line in the blade, and if you go and watch my video on that, then you'll see why. I had a blade open up like a mouth.
It was good.
But you can differentially quench things or spot quench things, I suppose, if you want to call it that. But majority of the time, you're heating the whole thing and quenching the whole thing. I'm of the opinion if you want a hard edge and a soft spine, you should quench the whole thing and then back temper the spine.
Well, one other thing you can do, one other perspective is rather than just heating the edge and leaving the spine cooler and then quenching, what knife makers will often do is actually quench at different speeds. So heat the whole thing up to a solid temperature across the entire thing, but then use clay, like in Sam's recent Hamon video, using clay or refractory across the parts that you want to cool slower. It means that rather than just edge quenching, you are quenching the whole thing at different rates.
So, Aaron, yes. Cubitron 2s are always worth using.
Oh, we're huge Cubitron fans.
They're Cubitron 2 discs. I don't have any experience with those. I think Alex does.
Yes, I'm well impressed with those. They're great. I haven't used like the disc sander discs. I've used the ones for the backed angle grinder sanding that are actually sort of a concave surface. Brain fart. Opposite of concave.
Convex.
Convex, that's the one. Convex surface, like a dome, and you put the disc on top of that, and it's actually rubber backed. You get some serious material removal with those things, and they last a very, very long time.
Yeah, Mr. Ideas, Alpha Forge, otherwise known as Sean Pittard, Patreon of both myself and Alex, asked disc sanders and flatness. Have we got any experience with that? And I can say, hell yes.
Yeah, flatness is probably one of the most... your ability to get flatness is one of the most important things to get on top of as a knife maker.
So it's actually cool that you asked this question, because on Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday. Yes, it was Wednesday. I went to D. Hedges' place, and for those of you who don't know, D. Hedges is a journeyman smith. I had her as an inspiration of the week a while ago. She's incredible. She's just got back into knife making herself, and I went over to her place specifically to talk about guard fitting. Guard fitting has been something that I've been struggling with for a long time, getting seamless guard fits, and so on this knife specifically, I'd left it kind of rough, and I was like, I'll go over there and we'll nut it out and we'll see what we can do. I spent 5 hours there, and in that 5 hours, she taught me more about that one single aspect of knife making than I had learned in the 7 years I was doing this. I was absolutely blown away with how effective she could tell. She could, show me all this kind of stuff. And one of the big things that I learned was flatness is absolutely key. And when we're talking flatness, we want micron flatness. One of the big issues is that my 2x72, while it creates relatively flat surfaces, does not flatten things. So one of the things is that if you're going to go off a 2x72, you then want to go to a disc sander, and you want a machined disc that's been specifically machined for flatness. She had a Beaumont Toolworks disc mounted to a Hare and Forbes or Machinery Warehouse motor, but honestly, it was scary how flat you could get things off the disc sander. I don't actually have a disc sander, and I now desperately want one because they are freaking amazing. The only other way to do it in your home shop is to use a surface plate, which I was fortunately donated a very large surface plate by a follower of the show. Alex is eating while I'm talking. I was actually donated a surface plate, and basically the only way to do that is to just stick that down with some Super 77 or some form of adhesive and, hand sand the full thing flat. And I had to do that after I came home from D's because I still needed to work on that guard, and I'm currently still working on it. I had to re-flatten it and I'm like, I need a disc sander. So, disc sanders, get one. If you don't have one and you're making knives, get a disc sander because they are indispensably awesome.
And one little bit of tidbit of information that I'd like to add into this, because I am a regular disc sander user, not just with knife making, but I do a lot of carpentry work, and disc sanders flatness is important there too. And you can get two types of disc sander. One of them has a metal disc that you stick an adhesive disc of sandpaper to, and the second one is that you get a metal disc that's backed with hook and loop, and you can stick hook and loop things, which is easier to peel off than peeling off stickers, because they're always made of that shitty sticker stuff that leaves residue behind, and it's awful. And so people get frustrated and they get the hook and loop type, but the hook and loop type has give in it, and you'll never achieve proper flatness.
Yeah, so 3M actually makes a feathering compound, which is specifically a glue that's designed to be peeled off and reused. So you can buy stuff like that. They used to sell it in a spray can, but now they only sell the paste, which can lead to a little bit of unevenness, but it's preferable to not anything else. I know, for instance, Dee uses spray adhesive on hers. It just means you have to peel it off and then just use some alcohol to wipe the disc down. But yeah, the closer contact you can have with that disc, the better. Having any kind of give in it, like some people use rubber backed for certain aspects, like handle sanding. But the problem is that any give in it is going to negate the ability for it to make flat. It's just, that there's no way to get around it.
Yeah, so hopefully that helps. We also have a question from Denise. Anyone have recommendations for getting over a fear of angle grinders? Just seen JT rip into his fingers and I'm terrified to use one. And
put a guard on it.
Funnily enough, yeah, don't watch my videos. I actually, Cards on the Table used to be utterly terrified of angle grinders. Back in the day when I first started getting into using them, I was just, I'd seen the horror story videos and it absolutely, using them terrified me. Now I use them one-handed, no guard, bloody hanging upside down from the monkey bars. I don't care. But the thing is, I'm still safe with them. And really, if you follow basic common sense safety, like 2 hands on the grinder, use a guard, don't put your face in line with the disc, watch where your sparks are going, and keep note of how the direction of the spark trail will change as you move the grinder through the piece. Common sense things will keep you perfectly safe. Really, they're not as dangerous as they sound, or as they are made out to be honest, if you just follow some basic common sense. It's when you get lax with them, or you're not prepared for the jumps that they can sometimes make, or you don't clamp your work down firmly enough when you're using them. It's things like that that are just foolish that leads to people having accidents with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, angle grinders are indispensable in a workshop that works with steel. So angle grinders are a must-have for most people, but they need to be respected and they need to be used properly. It's much like a gun. Like, anyone who's worked around or used guns knows that they are a tool to be respected. And the angle grinder is no different. They're just as dangerous if used improperly. But yeah, if you've got a guard on it, and I prefer angle grinders that have a handle, like a cross handle, because that just gives me that extra little bit of control.
And it keeps your offhand away from the disc as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually really like the Ryobi handles because they have like a big disc near big flange near the body of the grinder, which means that your hand can't slide down the handle if you're doing something stupid. But yeah, just use the guard, please.
Danny Jones actually makes a really good point that I should mention. If you are using an angle grinder, don't push a cutting disc through the piece. Let it just cut. You want to apply a little bit of pressure, but you're not trying to push it through. That's not how it works. It's not like a circular saw going through wood. It works in a different way. It's abrading the surface. So all you need is even contact from the edge of the wheel against the surface piece, and the cutting will happen. Just be patient with it. Wear your PPE. Wear good safety glasses, because those shards and sparks that come off of your angle grinder will get caught on air currents, and they'll bounce off your nose and go up under eye protection. So if you are particularly paranoid, you can either get some steampunk goggles like I use, which completely seal around your eyes, or you can use a face shield and safety glasses, both at the same time. or a VersaFlow helmet. VersaFlow helmets, if you've got that sort of, and one of those full head respirators, there's multiple brands out there, and you can check the comment section of my video review on the VersaFlow. Actually links to some really cool different brands that offer a very similar thing. Something that actually creates a seal around your whole face and then puts a shield there is a really good way to prevent any angle grinder sparks from flying out.
Yeah, absolutely.
But hopefully that really it's just getting out there and doing it. Grab yourself some 1/4-inch or 1/2-inch steel bar, chuck it up in a vise, and then just cut it into cubes. By the end of it, you'll be good. You just use it. That's the only thing I can say. That's
it. And yeah, just have fun. Be safe. Don't cut corners. Don't try and cut around corners.
Yeah, that's right. I think the main fear is that people think, especially using cutting discs or grinding discs, that they're just going to shatter at a random point and pieces will fly everywhere and embed like ninja stars into the walls. It's everybody's seen that photo of like the guy with the safety glasses with the piece of angle grinder disc like lodged in there.
Which was faked.
It was faked. It was doctors. There's not enough mass in an angle grinder disc to actually create that kind of penetration. I've had a disc fully shatter and explode on me while I was not using a guard, and the pieces went everywhere. And the most pain I was in is that it stung a little bit.
Yeah, I had half a disc bounce off my forehead once. Like the disc actually ripped in half. It didn't explode. It just tore in two pieces. Yeah. One piece went flying across the shed and hit the opposite wall, which was like 5 meters away. And the other one bounced off my forehead, and it didn't even leave a scratch.
Yeah.
So, like the idea that it'll embed in your skull or something and kill you is very unlikely. If I had glasses, if I didn't have glasses on and it hit me in the eye, I probably would have lost the eye, but that's pretty much your only risk.
Well, the main risks with angle grinder are concerns of torque, really. If that disc catches on hair or a beard or loose bit of clothing or a lavalier microphone cord or something like that, it will grab it and run with it quicker than our snot. It will just go so fast.
The worst injury I've had from an angle grinder was when I was wearing earbuds like these, which I hook over the back of my ears like you're supposed to. And I actually had the cord hanging free, and it got caught up in the angle grinder, and it actually cut the top of my ear.
Yeah. No matter how fast you think you are, you're not faster than an angle grinder. That's it. Sam's metaphor of comparing it to a gun is very, very true. If you are holding a handgun, you should be pointing it anywhere except at yourself. And an angle grinder's business end is no different. If it's facing away from you and it's well out of your way and there's no part of you coming near the muzzle, so to speak, then you're doing all right.
That's it. And the last thing is to keep aware of the sparks, because not only do the sparks hurt your eyes and stuff like that, but if you're putting a stream of sparks onto something very flammable, like your shirt,
or steel wool,
or steel wool, I was about to say that. It's happened to me. You can burn your shop down pretty fast.
Yeah, and
if your beard's long enough, Adam.
Don't wear clothes that you like, because you will those sparks will blast holes through your clothing that you just can't darn, you can't fix, can't patch. So wear like a leather apron or something if you're going to be doing a lot of cutting.
If anyone's used to my YouTube channel and my live streams, they normally see me in my Forge shirts, which have giant holes in them, like right about here.
Yep.
And that's because that's the level at which my angle grinder sits when I'm doing like grinding in the vise. So that the holes that you see like right here on my shirts in my videos, that's because of angle grinder sparks, because I don't put my friggin' apron on.
The astute observer will see there's lots of patches on my jeans, always on the left leg and the top of the thigh, and it's because that's where the angle grinder sparks always hit me because of the positioning of my vise. You can always kind of tell where somebody's vise is based on the holes in their garments.
Yeah, pretty much. You can tell how lazy they are.
So Sean has a question. He says, my question is about putting a different substrate on your flat platen, ceramic glass, something to keep from wobble on 2x72 on high grit. Sam's more of an expert on 2x72s than me, but my opinion on that would be that if you've got wobble on your 2x72, that would be a wheel alignment issue, not a platen issue. What you would have different platens for, different platen materials, is to get better flatness or potentially absorb less temperature, because platens get hot. If they're made of like steel, for example. So you kind of want it to act as a bit of a heat sink if you want to pull more heat out of the piece. But affecting wobble, I would say that would be a wheel alignment issue.
Yeah, so if it's wobbling side to side, then I agree with Alex. It's probably a bearing issue or a drive wheel issue or something like that.
Motor, but if you're slightly at a slight rotating cant.
I'm wondering if he's more talking about clicking from the belt. Because he said especially at high grits, and talking about the platen material, you might be talking about that clack, 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 clack that happens because of the belt going over the platen.
Usually from 400 up.
And that's the glue line. Unfortunately, that's the belt, not the grinder. There's no way to fix that. The only way to fix that is to use rubber contact wheels. Like using a large contact wheel when you're doing grinding with higher grits. Unfortunately, that's the only way to get around it. The more expensive your belt, the less likely you are to have glue line clack. But, yeah. So, yeah, he's talking about that glue line clackety-clack.
Yeah,
that you get.
That's just there. That's going to be there.
That's just the belt, man. So don't buy cheap belts. And, when you're talking about high grits, I highly recommend Trizact or Norax from anything from 240 grit up, because they have almost no glue line clack.
Which you can get from Weber Abrasives.
Which you can get from Weber Abrasives, our sponsor of the show. We would like to talk about another sponsor, however, who sponsors Tool Time.
Yeah.
And they're a new sponsor. And this Tool Time, well, we've got a kind of a couple of Tool Times. Both of them happen to have stuff from our sponsor in them. And our new sponsor is Creative Man, as you can see in the top right corner of your screen.
Yeah.
Creative Man is a small company here in Australia. It is actually quite a small company, even though it's very widely known.
And they do ship internationally as well. Like
they ship
long reach.
They ship everywhere. Anyone who has been watching That Works recently with Ilya and Matt from Man at Arms will have noticed that Creative Man featured in one of their videos recently, and it was one of their file guides. And I actually have somewhere. It's on top of my fridge.
Yeah, sorry, Aaron. Tool time.
Tool time. So they had one of their file guides on That Works, and I have one of their file guides, and it is freaking amazing.
Actually ties in with what Sam was talking about with what he learned from D. Hedges, because one of the things he always had trouble getting perfect shouldering on at the base of the ricasso of his knives where it meets the guard, and it was always going to be like a slight bit of slop, and D actually explained to him that it was the lack of alignment pins on his file guide, which means the actual threaded rods that go through normally to bolt it down allow for just a tiny bit of interplay between the two pieces, but alignment pins, like the ones on the Creative Man file guide, hold it perfectly level, absolutely flawlessly level.
I'm gonna have to go get the file guide.
Yeah, you go look at that, Denise. I'm not looking for something. I didn't actually look for something. We have a little skink that lives in our house, a cool skink they're called, the species. And there's these patches of sun next to my desk in the window, and he lives in the kitchen, and he walks all the way through the house and sits in this sun and sunbathes, and every so often he likes to walk back to the kitchen, but he goes through where my chair is, and I'm terrified of rolling my chair over the poor little thing. So if you see me looking around, it's because he's just cruising around like he owns the place. Trying to get my lunch.
You got a friend, have you?
Yeah, it's my little cool skink. We call him Lizzie.
All right, cool. Yeah, so this is the Creative Man file guide. This is the tungsten carbide file guide. I think this is like the V5.
And the astute observer will notice that the carbide plates are actually bolted on, and there is a reason for that.
Yeah, so a lot of tungsten carbide file guides have them glued on, and that means that if you crank down with the screws onto your piece, especially if the piece is quite narrow, say I'm trying to clamp this scribe. If I try and clamp that scribe in the file guide, then these two screws are going to bend that. And while tungsten carbide is incredibly hard, it's also incredibly brittle, and it will just snap. And if you have glue, that brittleness will cause the glue to just pop off. And so you'll end up with a piece of carbide just on the ground. Whereas with the bolted on, the other thing is that you can use tungsten carbide file guides to grind with. So you can actually use these. A lot of people use them on their knives. I've got my little utility here. You can actually put your knife in the file guide like that and grind your bevels and put the file guide all the way up to your platen to get your plunge cuts nice and even. It's not what I do it freehand, but that's certainly a way you could do it. And with the tungsten carbide, you're less likely to have the grinder belt dig into your file guide, which is a problem you get with hardened steel file guides.
Because a 2x72 belt will go through hardened carbon steel like butter if it's a low enough grit.
Oh yeah. And so this file guide has, obviously it's got the guide rods and it's got the screws. Now that's the best way to do it, and it's also very tight fitting. Like it takes a little bit of effort to get it to move, and that's good. That means that you've got a really close tolerance. And I actually have my other file guide in here. It's in pieces at the moment because I kind of just got rid of it. Just clang, smack, bang. And this is a more common style of file guide you find with... I just dropped something on the floor. No, I didn't. This is the more common style of file guide you find with high carbon steel. So you got your two file plates, and then you've got the screw plate, which is just basically a block of steel with some threaded holes in it. And then you have these, which is both your guide rod and your screw, and this is where the problem comes in. The tolerances aren't super tight. There's a lot of play, like they just drop out.
And that thou of difference is enough to actually create some quite bad alignment issues when you're trying to chase perfection, at least.
The big issue that I run into is I don't have a surface grinder, and I'm a very lazy bladesmith, so I don't try and get my ricassos perfectly perpendicular and perfectly parallel when I'm... God damn it. I'm dropping things. So yeah, it's... in order to have a ricasso that is perfectly parallel, you need to spend a little bit of time, or you need to have a surface grinder. And one of the big problems with a little bit of play is that see how they rock? Which means that whenever I used these on my normal knives, they would kind of move to meet because normally my ricassos are slightly tapered. These would slightly convex like that, which means that when I was doing my shoulder cutting, I was getting shoulders that did this, which doesn't lead to a very good flat surface. So while this was a usable file guide, it wasn't very useful because it kept making the situation worse. The other thing is that, as you can see, the faces are quite scarred up, and that's just from files. Because files are normally as hard as steel can get. And so even on hardened steel, you'll still scar other carbon steel. The other thing that I learned about the Creative Man file guide is... Where did I put it? There it is. Okay, so one of the things you'll notice, I have used this file guide quite a bit, but it looks pretty clean. I've used this file guide quite a bit, and it's covered in steel shavings. You know why? This is carbon steel. This is stainless. And the reason they use stainless is A, it won't rust, which means that's really good because it means I don't have to worry about it, but B, it's not magnetic, which means that all of those little filings that come off my file when I'm filing my shoulders and stuff like that don't stick to the file guide like they did with this one, which is a massive pain in the ass. Because what would happen is I'd file the shoulders on a blade, I'd unscrew it, open it up, take the blade out and want to put another blade in, and there would be filings all through the center of this, which if I then clamped this down on another blade, would dig into the ricasso on the sides of the knife. So I'd have to clean this out, I'd have to blow it out and use a brush to get it out. Whereas with the Creative Man one, because it's stainless, it doesn't have anything stick to it. So I can just put it onto the next knife, no worries. So yeah, I'm a massive fan of these, this Creative Man style, and they have no rock. So I'm in love with this. After going to Dee's place and her showing me how to use this properly, I love it.
Aaron Finn, yes, to address the elephant in the room, I do make and sell file guides as well. However, mine are they're aimed at being a low-budget file guide for beginners. They're hardened steel, which means you can't use them on a 2x72. They're designed for handwork with files. They're not going to be as good and long-lasting as a carbide-faced one, but they are much cheaper. Much cheaper than a carbon-faced one.
And that's it. And any file guide is better than no file guide. Like, let's just put it that way. And even my cheap, shitty one, and it wasn't cheap. I bought it from Jant's Knife Making in the US. I paid way more than I should have. Even this is useful for a lot of different things. But the better quality your file guide, the better quality your finishes are going to be, the better quality your overall work is going to be. But for someone just getting started, someone who just wants to get the bare bones together, something like this is going to do really well. And something like what Alex sells is going to do really well. Especially if you're wanting to use it to align plunge cuts and stuff like that, it's perfect for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
yeah. Don't feel that you have to buy a $200 file guide. But if you have the money, do it.
Yeah, I am sold out. I do actually. I'm making more. I just need to find the time. I've got the blanks set up to make 10 more to put up there because the last lot that I put up there sold out in 48 hours. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, you buy the tools that you can afford, the best tools that you can afford, and there's some things that like Sam was saying, a high-end carbide-faced, pin-aligned file guide is top-notch. It's going to allow you to do top-notch work. You do pay for it for good reason. They are top-notch tools. They are well-made. They'll last you for a lifetime of use. But if you don't necessarily have the money to invest in that, then buying something entry-level to get you started, get you familiar with a file guide and how to use one is perfect to do, to be honest. Because you use that the entry-level file guide to make knives to sell to make the money to buy the high-end ones. See you, Daniel.
Yeah, and see you, Dan. But so at the moment they're on the V5, and that's why this, and that's actually because of Mert Tansu, who's a kitchen knife creator, and he makes a lot of really tall kitchen knives, and he needed something that he could bolt on to these really wide blades.
Yeah.
But they're all available at Creative Man.
Yeah, creativeman.com.au. Check them out. And we've both been playing with some 1084 steel from there. It's idiot-proof, which is why I love it. And you can use it to destroy your room, as Sam is demonstrating.
You mean this?
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah,
this is a piece of the 1084 that they sent us. It even comes with, I'm not sure if it's going to show up on camera. It's not going to show up on camera.
Well, you can look at my Instagram profile and see a photo of it.
Hitting things.
But they apply a sticker onto the steel that you buy that shows you the heat treatment procedure, which is really nice. It's just a nice way to do it.
And it's the basic heat treating. Yeah. It's not the perfect heat treating. It's what you should do if you are a beginner.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
but one of the wonderful things about 1084 is that canola oil is not ideal, but it'll work.
It'll work.
One of the great things about 1084 is it's close to Eutectoid, as is physically possible whilst giving you a little bit of an edge in carbon. You can get a little bit of carbides out of it because it is slightly hyper-eutectoid. But it is very forgiving in its heat treat. The temperature ranges that you can quench at are actually quite wide to get a decent knife out of 1084, and that's one of the reasons why it's so highly recommended for everyone, is because it's ridiculously easy to heat treat.
Oh, massively easy.
See you later, Techron.
Difficult to mess it up, really. It's a great place to start, and it's a good steel. Like, you make nice knives out of it.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic steel. It's basically equivalent to like 01 52-100 to a certain extent, except 52-100 is a lot more carbide centered than anything
not
else.
As stain resistant as 52-100.
No, that's true. It's also it is a simple carbon steel. It's very high in manganese though, and it will take a hamon.
It's also
I know that for sure because this blade is 1084.
Oh, there you go. It's also preferential
from Creative Man.
Preferential when you want sort of foolproof Damascus, as foolproof as you're going to get it. 1084 and 15N20 paired together, it's almost like they just want to weld together. They work really well. And 1084 etches really nice and dark. Well, it doesn't etch dark. It ends up really dark in your etch compared to the brightness because of the high nickel content of the 15N20. So it's a great all-round steel to have in your shop.
And the high manganese content.
Yes.
And as we've discussed previously, the more manganese you have in your steel, the darker it gets, and the higher the carbon, the darker it gets. And 1084 is both high carbon and high manganese. So
we've got a question.
Yep.
Yamez is actually asking, a karambit, is a double edge required or is it single edge? Well, karambits are actually originated from a farming implement. They were used as a weapon later. They started out as a farm tool, and it was single edged on the inside of the curve.
Like a pruning knife.
It's almost like a little sickle sort of thing, but from a different part of the world. And so, traditionally you could say that they're single-edged, but really it comes down, if you're making a weaponized karambit, depends on the fighting style and what purposes you want it to do, really.
The majority of karambits that I've seen, both traditional and modern tactical, have been single-edged, so
Same here. Yeah.
Double-edge is definitely not a must.
No. So.
See you later, Yamez.
So.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah. That's it. So we have... Daniel's got a blacksmith challenge. He's going out in style. 1 set, square corner, 4 punched holes in 2 bars that line up, and a heel tenon. You do it first. Do a video on it and put it out there, and we'll have a go.
That's it. Yeah, you first.
Alrighty. Yeah. So we do have another emailed in question. It's got multiple questions in it. It's from Joel. He says, "Hey guys, thanks for answering my questions about handles and hammer drifts from a past episode. I just have a few more questions. I was catching up on some previous episodes and you were talking about good hammer technique, and I realized I have some very bad habits, choking up on the hammer, gripping it very tightly, etc. I was just wondering, what is the best way to fix those? Also, what is the best way to get heavy forge scale built up quickly from shiny steel? And finally, I am working on a Bowie knife and I changed my mind about the tang design and now the guard won't sit where I want it to. Can I just MIG/TIG weld it on, or is that considered cheating? Sorry, there are so many questions. This can be just be an email response if you want. Well, no, we're doing it live, Joel.
Yeah, we're doing it live.
That's how we roll. To answer the first question, it's really, if you've formed a muscle memory, the only way you're going to beat muscle memory is to consciously fight against it.
Work in a new habit.
Yeah, and a really good way to do it, because if you change your grip technique and swing technique on your hammering, it's going to drastically alter your face alignment, with the hammering. So a best way you can do it is to partially get some big solid nails and like put them into wood just enough that they stand upright, and do a whole long line of them in like either a stump, like the end grain of a stump, or a 2x4 or something like that, and then just go through and hammer them all in. And do it with the, consciously doing the correct hammer technique, and you will bend the heck out of the first several of them as you're trying to change your grip technique, and you'll miss hit and all that sort of thing. But by the end of it, if you can repeatedly hammer in a straight nail without bending it while doing the correct hammer technique, then congratulations, you've beat the muscle memory.
Yeah.
So, don't know if Sam has anything to add to that.
No, pretty much that's it. Practice, 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 practice. At the end of the day, the only way to get new skills is to practice them. And just be conscious about it. Like Alex said, you can't do it unconsciously. It's not like you're just going to completely switch your brain overnight. But if you consciously, go, okay, I'm choking up on my hammers all the time. Consciously make yourself extend that grip and get your swing going really well. Then you're gonna get there eventually. It's just that once you just be conscious of it, and once you notice that you're going back to your old habits, just push yourself back to do it again. And yes, you're gonna make mistakes and stuff in the beginning, but eventually you'll become a lot more confident with it.
Yeah. So the second question, what is the best way to get heavy forge scale built up quickly from shiny steel? Well, to question the high heat and leave it sitting there for a while, and then pull it out, let it oxidize, put it back in again, let it oxidize, put it back in again. But why would you be doing that? That would be my question.
If you want a black finish,
that's not the way to do it.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to get,
if you want like a black finish, then no, just hammer it.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want like a black finish, if that's what you're going for, then just do the linseed oil finish that we were talking about earlier. If you're trying to build up forge scale to create pitting and stuff like that, I can see how that would work. Kinda. It still doesn't do what you want it to do.
Once, really,
you still need to hammer that scale in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. But an oxidizing fire in your gas forge, or sitting it in the oxidizing layer, like right at the top or very, very much at the bottom of the fire, is the best way to oxidize steel, and that will give you some decent scale.
Yeah. And so the final thing, can you MIG or TIG weld on a tang, and is it cheating? It's not really cheating, but depends on how the knife is going to be used afterwards, because whenever you do a weld, it's going to create a weak point. Yeah,
well, you're going to zone in your tang, and if you're doing it to the guard, then that's going to be right at your guard to handle transition, which means that you're going to have your heat affected zone in the... I'm not sure, because I know he didn't send a photo with it. I'm not sure how it's not fitting anymore. So I'm imagining you're doing a hidden tang, and you've adjusted the tang slightly, and now the guard won't fit properly. My suggestion is either make a new guard, or make a new guard is pretty much the only suggestion. Or if you've got a longer ricasso, you can slightly put your file guide back on your ricasso and shorten your ricasso slightly and create a new set of shoulders for the guard to sit on.
Mm-hmm. And then make sure you put a lot of resin or epoxy in there to fill in that void that's going to be left, depending on how deep the new shoulder set is.
Yeah, so...
You don't want voids sitting there.
See you now. So that's basically the only thing I would say. I would say please don't weld it in place, although if you've got a close enough fit, you can silver solder it, and that's actually a legitimate way of doing things. Even mastersmiths solder their blades to their tangs sometimes, especially if they're doing bolsters and stuff. So silver soldering is an option, but yeah, most of the time you want to avoid welding anything on your blades.
Yeah. So
unless you forge welding.
Back 40 Forge has asked, what is the best steel for a skinning knife? And really, one that holds an edge would be
52-100.
Sam's a huge fan of 5200, and the reason that he's saying this is because it actually resists patina formation and staining over time, which if you're going to be making a skinning knife, you're going to want it to be used, and it's going to get covered in blood and gore quite a bit.
That is one reason. 52100 and D2 are two knives that I would highly recommend for skinning, and the reason both of those are incredibly useful for skinning is because both of them are carbide forming. I'm not going to go in depth on carbide forming in this video, in the podcast right now, but Nick Stent and I have been discussing it at length, and I've been doing a lot of research on carbide formation in steels. And the more carbides you form, the more toothy your edge will be. You won't get as mirror polished an edge, but you will definitely get a toothier edge. And the more carbides you have, the more wear resistant it is, because carbides are basically diamond. So, yeah, 1095 works just fine. 1095 is another carbide forming steel. Not as much of a carbide forming.
1095 and W2 is what I like to use, or most of the time I use old files, which is more often than not something around the realm of W1, W2, 1095. That's what I use when I make my skinning knives, and I've been making a lot of them recently. And the edge retention that you get out of that steel is just phenomenal, because depending on the skill of the wielder of the knife, a very talented skinner will avoid bone and move the blade around bone. Somebody that doesn't really care or isn't that good will be knocking against bone repeatedly, and bone is a really quick way to dull a knife. So a steel that actually focuses on edge retention, and 52100 does that as well. It's exceptionally good at edge retention. So you don't need as much flexibility as you'd think in a skinning knife. In a boning knife you do, not so much in a skinning knife.
Yeah, and so Aaron said, so scrap my 1084 skinner. No, don't do that, because 1084 is just as good as anything else. Realistically, skinning knives don't have to be super hard and hold an edge for super long. If you're skinning a lot of game, then you should be carrying a small steel anyway, honing steel. Mm-hmm. Preferably a smooth steel or a pickled steel rather than a ribbed steel. Please don't use ribbed steels. But yeah, I would highly suggest any steel you can use is basically going to be a decent skinner. It'll just depend on how long you're going to hold an edge for. The only reason I say 52100 and D2 is because they are ideal for the task. Yeah. But most steels will work. I've used M4 or M2 for steel for knives and stuff like that, and that's a really good steel as well. That's kind of one of those things.
Yeah. So. Drop Bear Forge has asked, not having ever used purpose-made quench oils, is there any method difference in the use of purpose-made oils versus something like canola oil? Not really, although I've found I use Horton's Q, which is kind of like a Parks 50 equivalent. I found that it works really well at room temperature. I don't often have to preheat at all to get good quenches with it. Whereas if I was using something like a canola oil or something like that, preheating becomes sort of par for the course.
Well, yeah, and preheating should be some part of your regimen anyway, mainly because you want to have repeatable results. Preheating doesn't necessarily mean preheating to a certain... preheating normally means preheating to a certain temperature.
So that every time you quench, that oil is going to be the same temperature, regardless of what the ambient temperature of your environment is.
I would actually suggest getting one of those in-pot thermometers that they use for roasts and stuff.
With the spike on the back.
Sticking that in your quench tank so that you can heat it to a temperature. Once you've quenched the knife, the temperature will rise slightly. You let it drop back down before you quench another blade. If you're doing lots of quenching, that's why you want to preheat your oil, is so that you keep a consistent temperature. And that's true of all oils, because changes in temperature and stuff like that will affect the viscosity of your oil and affect the quenching speed.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely preheat your oil. But yeah, realistically, there's no difference in use between them. You stick the blade in there once it's a critical temperature.
Yeah. Don't think though that if you suddenly buy 10 liters of Parks 50 and make up a nice container for it and all that sort of thing, don't suddenly think that you've got a magical quenchant that will just do everything for you. Though it's still there's still work involved in getting precision and getting repeatability.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The quenchant is one very small part of the whole heat treating process.
Yeah, so Danny Jones has asked, what's your process of normalizing a blade? I've seen someone slowly swing their blade in an arc straight out of the forge so that it didn't create hot pocket around the blade while it slowly cooled. Now, I've actually talked about this with Sam before, and you see this happen a lot on the ForgeCast, not the ForgeCast, Forge and Fire. You don't see it happen here. And it's the reason that they do it there is because they're under a time limit, and normalizing the blade is basically the process of heating it to past critical and then letting it cool down to the point where you can touch it with your own hands without burning yourself.
Slowly
and
is the operative.
The key is slowly. So when you're on limited time, you want to speed that up. So swinging it around and getting that airflow over, it's going to speed up the process of cooling it down. But that's actually sacrificing the quality of the normalization cycle. I don't know what Sam does. What I do is actually have a little channel of bricks that I've made, like a little U shape. And once I've taken it out, if the spine's thick enough, I'll just sit it on a brick. If it's not thick enough to actually stand up on its own, I will just sort of put it so its spine is on the brick and slightly leaning against another brick, because brick doesn't really absorb the heat it would if it was sitting on the spine of the back of an anvil or something like that. I definitely don't lay it down on its side, because that's going to cool one side faster than the other side. You want to try and make it cool evenly and slowly.
Yeah, so the best method to normalize your blades is to have a little hanging tree or something like that, or a little hook that you can hang it off. And a lot of the time, I'll weld a little washer on the end of my tang. So basically, I'll pull it out of the forge and then hang it off the washer, so it's free hanging in the air. Because that way, it's completely, it's not in contact with anything. It's going to normalize exactly evenly. The issue with swinging it around is, especially if you've already got bevels ground in, is that one portion is going to be thinner than the other and is going to cool faster. Now, that's true if it's free hanging in air, but if you're swinging it around, you're going to be speeding that cooling up. To a certain extent, some steels will harden in that state. So you'll actually be inducing more stress by swinging it around. And depending on how you're swinging it, like Alex and I were talking about going into quenches a while ago, and when you're doing like horizontal quenches, if you're even like 2 degrees off to the side, right? Like, this is a little bit exaggerated, but if you're even just a tiny little bit off when you go into the quench, that'll cause a warp. When you're swinging the blade in the air, if you're swinging the blade at a slight angle like this, you're going to be cooling that side more than you're going to be cooling this side, and that's going to cause a warp. So swinging the blade around, especially if you're like swinging it side to side or something like that, you're actually just asking for differential, hardening or differential cooling of the blade. You're just asking for issues. The only real way to normalize is to have it free hanging or sitting on a heat brick or something like that, where it can cool slowly, naturally, and let those little molecules relax.
One other thing I'd probably add to that is if you are going to hang it up and you are working in a shed or a forge that's sort of isolated elsewhere, be aware of air currents and cross breezes and things like that, because if you've got it hanging up in a window and all the breeze from outside is blowing on one side of it and the heat from your shop is on the other side of it, then it's going to cool at an uneven rate as well. One really great way to actually ensure an even cool down would be to submerge it in something like perlite or vermiculite, although that will drastically slow it down and it'll make your normalization process take a very long time. I've put hot steel in a bucket of vermiculite and it has still been way too hot to touch 2 hours later. So, but I mean, that's a good normalization cycle, really.
Pretty much. And I mean, the only problem with that is that you're sticking something into another, kind of thing. So there's a chance that you can warp things just by the contact. So that's the only reason I would be hesitant.
And also, one of the things that came up when Sam and he mentioned we were talking about this earlier, when you are heating the steel for the normalization cycle, make sure that it's been heated evenly, because no matter what you do to actually allow the steel to cool, no matter how much effort you put into allowing it to cool at an even rate, if it's been heated unevenly and one side has gotten hotter than the other one, then it's going to cool at different rates. It's going to, like, different parts of the knife are going to get to a cool enough temperature to touch at different rates, which is going to make your grain growth uneven, and it's something to consider. That's why a lot of people you see put square channel or rectangular channel into their forge and then put the knife in that, and that way there's no direct flame hitting the knife. It's just more ambient heat. So it was a very valid point that Sam made when we had that conversation.
Yeah, and Alex actually pointed out something very good, which is that sticking your blade in vermiculite is not annealing. It is normalizing. A lot of people call sticking your blade after critical into vermiculite annealing. Thank you, Shadow.
It's the third co-host of the ForgeCast.
It's the third co-host. Oh, damn it. I'm just going to let her out. Hold on.
She's barking mad.
Goodbye.
We
Give me
love
2
Shadow.
seconds, Alex. You keep walking.
I'll keep it up. Don't worry. So yeah, it's annealing is a very different process to normalization, and basically normalization is making sure that the grain structure throughout the entire piece, all of the strain from forging to shape or different amounts of heating, even if you're doing stock removal knives, when you're grinding different parts are getting to different temperatures, and the grain structure of your knife will end up being mismatched. And normalization sort of relaxes that grain structure so that it's even throughout the entire piece, because a warp will happen in your quench basically because this is a very oversimplified way of putting it, but you've got large grain structure and the quench tightens it up really, really quickly. But if you're tightening one part faster than the other, then it's going to make a bend happen in the direction of the tighter grain. Annealing is not the process of relaxing the grain. Basically, it's sort of normalization. You generally do it 3 times because it guarantees that the entire blade across the entire piece has been normalized to a point where the grain structure is the same size throughout the entire piece. And that way, when you do the quench, theoretically, everything will clench down and the grain will tighten up nice and tightly at the same rate across the entire piece, meaning that you won't get warps. So that's normalization, but annealing is a different procedure altogether.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, stepson showed up to pick some stuff up.
Ah, there you go. I was just leading you in to explain annealing. They now know what normalization is.
Yeah, so annealing is just basically normalization slowed down, but a lot of people will have heard the term spherodize annealed, and that's talking about spherodizing the molecules or spherodizing the it's hard to explain in simple terms. I'm still not super read up on it yet. But basically, most spherodizing cycles, most annealing cycles require step-down procedures of temperatures stepping down 100 degrees at a time over a day, over many hours. So annealing tends to, taking something to critical and sticking it in vermiculite will slow down the cooling to a certain extent, but it's still going to cool down through the recrystallization in under 10 minutes, normally. I imagine if you take your blade out of the forge, put it in vermiculite at critical temperature, and then pulled that blade out of the vermiculite 10 minutes later, it would be black at least. So
way too hot to touch, but it'll be black.
Oh yeah, but annealing normally requires that you're holding critical for an hour, and then stepping down from critical 100 degrees and then holding that for an hour, and so on and so forth for a long period of time to get those crystals completely spherodized.
Yeah, and Sam's process of annealing is generally speaking to keep it at that critical point in his forge and then turn the forge off, close it up and walk away and let the forge cool down very, very slowly overnight, because a gas forge that's been running all day takes hours and hours and hours to cool down inside. While that's still not a full anneal, that's about as practically good anneal as you're going to get in a home shop.
Especially seeing as my forge is incredibly dense, so it holds its heat forever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really good way to do that.
So
so we have a question from Jared.
Mm-hmm.
We already answered the Kukri question, back 40. But Jared said, tell me about a Nemi construction. It's the high carbon steel that shrinks, right? Yes. It is the high carbon steel that shrinks. And I actually had a really good example of that. I'm sad I can't show you guys. But a friend of mine recently bought some Takefu Nimai, which was VG10 and stainless steel. And he was plate quenching with aluminium plates and a clamp and all that kind of stuff. And no matter what he did, it would always end up like a banana. And they were huge. Like he was making the Alamazan knives. So like 3 inches tall, like 6 inches long. And he even had one of his friends who weighed about 120 kilos stand on the plates to try and get them to stay straight. Yeah. And the VG10 just cut lifted underneath him. Literally lifted him. Like he felt himself being lifted by the VG10. So yeah, Nimai is definitely one of those things where you have to correct your warp after heat treat. You can't get away with it otherwise.
So we have a question from YP Donny. He says, I'm a father of 5 and have very little time to forge. Any suggestions for getting better at this craft with limited time and resources? Sam and I probably have very different views on this because we've actually had this question before a few times from viewers on this, worded in various different ways. My thing is to find a small and relatively quick project that allows you to practice core fundamentals of forging. And for me, my favorite thing to suggest to people for this is S-hooks. They're fast to make. You can make them in different sizes. It allows you to practice scrolling, tapering, twisting, decorative elements, finishes. And basically, if you have 2 hours in the forge and that's all you can get in the week, spend that 2 hours making as many S-hooks in various different forms as you possibly can. And by the end of it, it's the wax on, wax off Mr. Miyagi thing. By the end of it, you can actually draw out. You can draw tapers. You can twist beautifully. You can add decorative elements. You've mastered scroll work. You get consistency in your work and all this stuff that can translate to so many other projects.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and I totally agree. Make time when you can and work on small projects, stuff that you can complete really quickly. A lot of people who are busy people, like they work full-time or they have a family and stuff like that, and they can't find time. One of the big mistakes they make is that they try and make something huge, and they have to work at it piecemeal over months, and they get burned out before they even get to the end of it.
Or their ideas for the project change halfway through because it's been spread out too long.
You're talking to me.
And then you knock the tang off and you got to weld a new tang on.
Shush. But yeah, so find small projects that you can make quickly and make time when you can. And sometimes taking time for yourself is incredibly important. As a guy who has a stepson and I am a stay-at-home parent and stuff like that, and I also do all the housework and stuff, I totally understand. But yeah, taking that time out to do something that you love is incredibly important. So yeah, definitely. And it doesn't need to be a full day in the workshop. Even an hour in the workshop, you can make like 5 S-hooks in an hour if you're good. If you're not, then you can make 1 S-hook in an hour. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, Aaron says hooks and pegs. That's all he did for 3 years. Hooks is a great one. And actually, my inspiration of the week, Black Bear Forge, has done Hook of the Week challenge for the last several weeks. And he just shows just how much variety you can get in hooks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hooks are an amazing practice piece. Leaves are another one, like leaf keychains. I developed a bottle opener that can be forged relatively quickly. So it's one of those things where you can definitely find little things. And I know that you might want to start making knives and stuff like that. But if you start small with S-hooks and stuff, then you might be able to move into stuff like Celtic blacksmith knives, and in an hour you might be able to make one of those, and so on and so forth. And most of us can find at least an hour a week. Like 1 hour a week to get into the forge isn't an unrealistic goal.
Yeah.
So just don't focus on trying to get better overnight. Just focus on making at least an hour a week where you can get out to the workshop.
It won't happen overnight, but it will happen.
That's it.
So do you want to slip in another song of the week?
Sure.
Just because. We've been going for about 3 hours now. 2.5 hours.
Close to. Yeah. I did. I've been recently getting back into the indie side of YouTube again. Mainly because I did that little jaunt down memory lane of listening to all the old indie singers that I was listening to back when I was a kid. And so I stumbled across a couple of new creators. They've been around for years, but they're kind of part of the crew that used to be the crew that I used to listen to.
Right.
And I've kind of got hooked on two creators, and I'm kind of tossing up which one I want to shout out, because I want to shout them both out, but I'll eventually put them in the song of the week, in a future episode anyway. But this week I'm going to say Dodie, which is Jody but with a D. And she did a song called Monster. Now, the reason I came across her is because she did her song Monster with a band that I have followed for a long time, Pomplamoose. Pomplamoose Music. And funnily enough, Pomplamoose is a really important part of my YouTube career, because actually the guy from the main guy from Pomplamoose is actually the guy who started Patreon. He was the one who developed Patreon and who runs it. So, and he developed that because Pomplamoose music was something that he wanted to, have support of and stuff like that. And he wanted to have all these small-time music creators have an ability to make money for their music without having to be signed up to a label.
Yep.
Because he saw so many really talented musicians that didn't have any kind of financial backing. And he was seeing all of these guys quit because they just couldn't make a go of it. So he was like, how can I make a place where they can make a living off of their music without fucking signing up to MCG?
Yeah.
So yeah, he created Patreon, and yeah, that's it. But those are kind of standout stories.
Yeah, they are.
So yeah, he developed Patreon for that. So yeah, I highly suggest you listen to Monster by Dodie, and if you can, on YouTube, the Pomplamoose, the Pomplamoose and Dodie version is my favorite. Unfortunately, that's not on Spotify. Just her standard one is, but the Pomplamoose one is my favorite.
Very cool. So my second song of the week would have to be the song Novocaine by the Unlikely Candidates. Yeah, when you're having one of those days that we've talked about on past episodes, it's a really good, sometimes good to listen to a song that sums it up. Hey, you just rather be numb.
Yep.
It's one of those songs. It's a hard hitting song, and it's a good jam really. It's a nice tune to it. The guy's got a great voice. Just one of those songs you can really relate to sometimes.
Absolutely.
So,
and make sure you check out the playlist, guys. There is a playlist on this channel for all of the ForgeCast songs of the week, and there is a guy who's made a ForgeCast song of the week Spotify playlist. It's called Not the ForgeCast. I actually found it hard to find. But yeah, it's called Not the ForgeCast.
See you, Sean.
Not the ForgeCast Spotify playlist. See you, Sean.
See you, Wiley.
Bye, Wiley.
And hello, Ben.
Hello, Ben.
So,
time for us to go. Ben's here.
That's it. Time to wrap the show up. That was a good 2.5 hours.
Yep, that's it.
So we have another listener email, kind of. It's actually from somebody that we've talked about on the show multiple times, Seth Wood, who a lot of the people in this stream have actually been contributing to helping raise money for. Awesome guy. And he has sent us a question that's probably going to lead to a lot of ranting. But just to, give you guys a trigger warning. He says, I would like to know about the laws of inertia and how they apply to blacksmithing. Most importantly, how inertia affects forging penetration. which kind of dives headlong into the raging debate online about anvil rebound.
Good thing Dan left.
Yeah, Dan's gone. It's safe to talk about it now. But yeah, Trent and Ty did a video on it. He's done a couple of videos on it. Roy Adams has done videos on it. Sam and I differ in opinion on this. And the short answer is, Seth is talking specifically about inertia. Now, inertia, for those who don't know, is basically an object's propensity to continue either staying still or moving in a direction with and have resistance to opposing force, either changing
Newton's first and second law.
Yeah, so if a car's driving forward, inertia is how difficult it is to move it from the direction it's going, or to get it moving if it's staying perfectly still.
Yes.
So a larger hammer is going to have more inertia than a smaller hammer, because if somebody was to come and slap it out of the way mid swing, you can slap a chasing hammer out of the way very easily, but try slapping a 12-pound sledge out of the way.
Yeah. And actually, that kind of calls into Seth's work, because he normally makes hammers and stuff by hand. And in order to do that, in order to get full penetration of a strike, you need a heavy hammer. And he normally forges with a 5-pound and above hammer.
Yeah.
He is the exception to the rule of you don't need to use a big hammer. And I mean, the reason that we harp on about not needing to use a heavy hammer is because a lot of people start trying to use a 4-pound hammer to forge coat hooks and, knives. You really don't need a big hammer for that kind of stuff. If you're making if you're making stuff out of inch square bar, you need a big hammer. So yeah, I mean, inertia is incredibly important in that aspect, and it's actually really important to some of the fundamentals of blacksmithing. But as far as hammers go, you want to use the size of hammer for the size of work.
And but it does tie directly into this whole anvil rebound debate that's been going on, because of the simple fact that energy never gets created and it never goes away. It never gets destroyed. There's always a persistence of exactly the same amount of energy. The amount of energy that you put into something will come out of it. And when you hear an anvil have an echoing ring after you hit it, that sound is energy being dissipated. Sound is the way that energy can be dissipated. Vibration is a way that energy can be dissipated. Heat is one of the most common ones that it comes in the form of friction usually, but there is a physics phenomenon, I guess is probably the word for it, called Hooke's law. And Hooke's law is the amount of stress, the ratio of the amount of stress that a material can be put under versus the strain that it receives from receiving that stress. So, for example, if you were to hit steel so fast and hard that it would actually stretch it out, if you were watching it under a microscope with sort of zoom lens, you would see it sort of stretch under the blow to a certain point, but then it would retract back to the original shape. That is basically because that steel and the impact that it was under was within the proportional limit of Hooke's law. Basically, there is a certain range of strain that it can reach when it will return back to the shape that it was. Now, the energy that causes that to happen, and the amount of, basically, if you were to graph that with sort of stress on the vertical axis and strain on the horizontal axis, you'll notice that it goes up at a particular angle in a straight line. That angle that it is on is called Young's modulus of elasticity, and the steeper that angle, basically the more brittle or hard the surface is, and the lower it is, the more soft it is. Now, if you were to take a hammer and hit a piece of wood, it has a very, very low modulus of elasticity, so you would leave divots in the wood. It would actually deform, which means it goes past the realm of Hooke's law, past the proportional limit, and goes into a place where it becomes deformed, essentially. Now, if you have an anvil that's got rebound, like a nice rebound to it, and you were to just gravity drop your hammerhead onto the anvil, you would notice if the hammer is hardened correctly, it will sort of bounce. Ball bearing test is a good example of this as well. It will bounce, and the reason it bounces because you'll hear a ting. That's some of the energy being lost, the ting sound that happens. Some of the energy will be lost in the friction of the ball, and the amount of energy that you actually put into it was where the ball fell from. It will hit the anvil, and it will not reach back up to your hand again. If no other energy was lost through sound or vibration of the anvil or friction, the ball would go all the way back up to your hand, but it doesn't. It'll go almost up there on an anvil with good rebound, which means that the energy is largely being thrown back. If it doesn't bounce back much, that the energy is being absorbed by the anvil. Now, Dan Moss actually did a video where he did a really good... He didn't talk about it much in the video, this phenomenon, but he actually shows it very well. If you were to take that same hammer that you bounced off of an anvil with rebound and then put white-hot steel on the anvil and drop the hammer onto it, the hammer doesn't bounce at all. It just goes and stays there. So where did that energy go? That energy has gone into the steel, and it deforms the steel because that angle that I was talking about on that graph is going to be really, really high while the steel is cold. But the hotter you make steel, the lower that angle goes down, which means that your proportional limit drops, and you will actually deform steel easier when it's hot. So basically, all of this comes down to the fact that an anvil with rebound is going to put more of the force of your blow into the work than one without. However, the amount of difference that you're actually talking about is very small. So you can effectively forge on a rock if you want, and it will work fine. The only real practical difference is more anecdotal than anything else, that rebound in an anvil is easier on your shoulders and arms. However, if your forging technique, your hammer technique, is good enough, then your arms and shoulders and joints shouldn't really be affected that much at all. But yes, the answer is, I mean, just according to physics, the irrefutable laws of physics, rebound does affect your work. In the world of the practical sense, it's not a huge amount. So I'm sure Sam has some things he wants to put in, because he and I do differ on the opinions on this. I'm a massive physics nerd. Cards on the table.
I don't actually have much difference to say. I mean, that's pretty much exactly what I was going to say, is that, and actually DP in the workshop did a really good video on that, where he just basically put a piece of white-hot steel on there and dropped a ball bearing onto it, and it just went just stuck in the steel. So, you know, like that is pretty much it. And I'm a massive physics nerd myself. I'm also a massive steel nerd and chemistry nerd, and I love all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's it. We're all just nerds. But yeah, thank you very much for that. That was really good. I'd forgotten the name of Hooke's Law, so I was waiting for it. I was like, that's right.
That's the one.
But I mean, for practical senses, I've always come back to the reason that rebound was so sought after in anvils, especially back in the old days, was because they would be putting them into a factory setting where they'd be making lots of stuff, and you would normally put the apprentice on an anvil, and the apprentice had some really shit aim with his hammer and would hit the anvil quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a soft anvil and a hard hammer, you end up with a very dinged up anvil.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, you'd end up with swayback in your anvil, and you know, if you had a soft anvil, the faster that swayback would develop. So hardened anvils, really good rebound anvils, were basically just a guarantee that your anvil is going to last a while. But you know, like you say, you can use anything, a rock, anything that's suited, rail track, a piece of mild steel. I've forged on mild steel before. It's no problem. Cast iron, all that kind of stuff. Soft material doesn't necessarily mean a bad anvil. It just means that you have to be a lot more careful with how you swing your hammer. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can argue back and forth about whether or not rebound is useful. For me, an anvil with decent rebound just simply means that I'm going to have a tool that's going to last me a very long time.
Also, this is purely subjective, but I do have a striking anvil that's made of 2 pieces of rail track with forklift tying across the top, and it clacks. It is such a bad sound. Clack is the best way I can describe it. It's onomatopoeic. It sounds like that. It sounds like clack, 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 really loud. And if you had to work on that all day, you would be driven insane. The nice, pleasant, soft ring of an anvil that's been chained down or magnetized is just pleasant to hear, frankly. And if you're going to be doing this a lot, have something that sounds nice.
Yeah, and also coming back to density, that anvil doesn't have a great rebound on it either, even though the top is hardened.
Mm.
So, and a lot of that comes down to the density, that you've got the 2 rail tracks and then have a void in the middle. And that void is absorbing a lot of
Well, it's filled with sand and oil, but it's just like a dead mass, really.
Yeah, that's it. But the sand and oil don't really provide any kind of elastic advantage.
No.
They deform, so...
minimizes a bit of the echo.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, the argument is it's not even an argument. It's a fact. But whether it's got a practical application it comes down to being subjective, really. Like, what do you like working on? I mean, some people have their ASO and they damn well love it, but a lot of those people have just never worked on a nice hardened anvil before.
Oh man, I was having a look at the Beamish anvils. So Bruce Beamish has started importing anvils to Australia, anywhere from, I think he does like an 80 kilo all the way up to 180 or 240 kilo anvils, and they're in the German pattern, and they are like 60 Rockwell on the face.
Right.
They are stupid hard, and I've seen videos of people slinging 16-pound sledgehammers at them, just to test the rebound and to test the face deformity, and they just do not deform at all.
Nice. I've heard they're reasonably priced too.
They are incredibly reasonably priced. So, like, they're a brilliant anvil, and I desperately want one. He had one here at Perth Knife Show, and I just drooled over it a few times. But unfortunately, I couldn't afford it.
One aspect of this rebound argument that is totally tangential to Seth's question is Roy Adams brings this up a lot, is the mass underhammer whole thing, have the nice big heavy anvil, which is very valid. The difference on using a big heavy anvil is noticeable instantly, as soon as you start working on it. However, keep in mind that throughout history, a lot of very good work was done with things like stake anvils that were portable.
Tiny little baby stake anvils.
Yeah, and that little tiny stake anvil was hammered into a big old stump. And that works just as well, and history has proven that it just works just as well. And don't necessarily get bogged down in thinking that you have to have a giant, massive anvil like my beautiful 320-pound Sawyer's anvil from 200 years ago. You don't necessarily have to have that. A stake anvil in a big old stump will do a very serviceable amount of work.
Absolutely. And, I mean, a lot of it comes down to how you affix your anvil to the stump. If you're cinching that anvil down to your mount, whatever it is, sufficiently that it's not vibrating on that stump and having some of that energy lost to vibration, then you're basically creating one solid mass. And so the denser your stand, like I know a lot of people who make steel stands and they bolt the steel stand to the ground. And it's a rigid steel stand. So you're basically turning the entire
Earth.
concrete floor into your anvil stand, and that's going to give your anvil as much mass as your friggin' shed floor weighs.
That's it.
Like some people just go for a stump sunk into the ground a couple of feet. Like I think that's what John Switzer has. Is his stump is literally sunk into the ground. And yeah, that does just as good a job. You're talking about creating a solid connection with the floor. And so yeah, you can have a 10-pound anvil seated on 600 pounds of concrete, and it'll have just as much density as a 600-pound anvil just sitting on the floor.
And the trick is to just lock it down so that any vibration that the anvil receives is absorbed into that mass. And that's why stake anvils was so effective throughout history. And a really good way to actually see some practical examples of those is to go back to my first inspiration of the week, is John Switzer. He actually recreated the 3 anvils found. They were smaller stake anvils from history, but he actually recreated them and then embedded them into a stump and showed how they would have been used. And it's a beautiful demonstration of just how cool they were. And it's a cool thing to have anywhere, especially if you are doing live shows and demos, and that being able to just carry an anvil around in your hand and then find a stump, stick it in there, hammer it in, you're good to go. It's bloody brilliant.
And 2 other channels to look at is Joey Vandersteeg. He makes tiny little baby anvils, and he actually forged on one of his tiny baby anvils that weighed probably about a pound.
Yep.
He actually forged a leaf on one. And the other one is Rune Malt Bertram Nielsen.
Yes.
Who I continually talk about. Yeah. But he actually forged 3 Viking anvils from, historical records. And he used the first anvil to forge the second one, to forge the third one.
That was part of his series of building the submerged forge, where he's actually sitting in a hole in the ground and has the tools laid out around him. That was a brilliant series.
So yeah, he uses stake anvils all the time, and he does some amazing work with those. So, it definitely doesn't require a giant anvil. Yeah,
so hopefully that answers your question that came up there, Joel. The size of the anvil affecting forging. I started with a 66-pound anvil, cast steel, very hard face on it. It was a nice Australian-made one, not an import. And it does a surprising amount of work for having a small anvil. Like Sam said, it comes down to how are you mounting it? What's it mounted on? How well is it mounted? How snug do you have it tied down to that? And how snug is that mount then mounted to the floor? My new big 320-pound anvil is on a 250-kilo stump just sitting on the ground. That thing's not going anywhere. It needed a tractor with forklift front mounted on it to be able to get it into my shop. But my 66-pound one is on a stand that itself probably weighs about 80 kilos. It's just made of steel, and I don't have it bolted to the floor, but because it's only a 66-pound anvil, the amount of vibration that thing is experiencing is easily absorbed by an 80-kilo stand.
Absolutely. I mean, my daily driver is a 40-kilo, the 40-kilo O'Dwyer, which is mounted to probably like 60 kilos of Jarrah, which is just sat on my concrete.
And that's a solid wood for people who are not familiar with it. It's very solid wood.
Very solid hardwood. And I make everything from hammers, axes, knives, and everything on that. So it's definitely, doable. I definitely want a 180-kilo anvil. That's just because I want one. I would love one of Seth's 522-pound anvils.
I totally relate with him that he dragged that thing out into the road when the bushfires came. That man is a beast. To be able to do that, it's like heroic.
Yeah, but I would love something like that one day, but it's not necessary to most of what I do.
Yeah. So we have been going for 3 hours straight, and you guys aren't sick of us yet.
Yep.
Should we put a bow on it, you reckon?
I reckon that's we're coming up on the 3-hour mark.
I'd say that's long enough for any ForgeCast episode.
I would say so.
Huge thank you to everyone that showed up, even the people that the dearly departed who have left. But some of you have actually stayed through for the entire thing, which is awesome. Give us a shout in the comments at the moment if you were actually here from start to finish. I want to know who you were.
That's it.
So hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. You guys know how it works. You can find the ForgeCast on Facebook and Instagram. On Instagram, it's the.forgecast, and on Facebook, it's the ForgeCast. If you would like to ask us a question to be answered either via email or in future episodes, you can email us at ask.forgecast@gmail.com. And you can find Sam.
You can find me at Samtown's Blacksmith at YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Etsy, Redbubble, the kitchen sink.
Yep, was waiting for it.
And you can find Alex.
You can find me right here. You're on my YouTube channel right now, so you've got no excuse not to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. But you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram and Etsy and Redbubble and Patreon and TikTok, which I still hate myself for saying. Makes me feel very old, but yeah, you can find me everywhere. You guys probably already are following me, and if you are, that's awesome. If you haven't hit like on this live stream yet, be sure to do so. Check out my Redbubble for ForgeCast merchandise. Every bit of ForgeCast merchandise goes towards supporting the show. The PayPal donate link is just below our video streams, just down there. Donations there also go towards keeping this show alive. And a huge thank you to our sponsors. We've got Weber Abrasives. These guys are awesome. Give Rob a call. Rob will help you get your Cubitron fix, as well as a heap of other stuff. He's also a lovely guy, just genuinely nice to talk to. So are the guys at Creative Man. Get your steel there, get your file guides, they got so many good toys to play with there. So check out their website. Even if you're overseas, they ship internationally, and they are just freaking awesome dudes. They're just really nice.
Bjorn, the owner of Creative Man, is just a fantastic dude. I love him.
Yeah, it's just that sort of small business care and attention that you don't really see much anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
But we had Frank Swearingen, Danny Jones, 573 Knives, and B&D Forge are all full-time listeners, and also Taz Butcher, Adam, was here all the time.
Yep, he always is.
Yeah, he's always here.
Peering in the window over here while I was...
Yeah.
You guys are awesome. Thanks for sticking by, and thanks for popping by and listening to us rant for 3 hours.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It was good fun. It was a lot of work to get this all set up, and I'm glad it all got, we pulled it off.
Yeah, nothing actually broke for the entire thing, except me muting Sam accidentally for a while there, but no, I didn't hear too many complaints.
No, well, no one really wants to hear me talk anyway.
Remember, guys, Sam is actually going over to Blade Symposium in a few days, and then he's going to be disappearing on a holiday for a few weeks, and we're going to have filler episodes in the meantime while he's gone. So it won't be we won't be answering questions that you've emailed in, because it'll be we've pre-recorded the episodes, and so normal scheduling will come back once he returns from his trip.
That's it. I'm gone from the 5th of March all the way through to the 2nd of April, so that's where I'll be. I'll be over east.
Yeah.
All right, so
no rest for the wicked. We're going back to work.
Yep. Oh, God.
Sam's going to finish waking up. Maybe have a nap.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks again for popping by,
guys. Thank you very much.
We'll see you again soon.
See ya.